Hi guys, and welcome to Relaxation Bedtime History. Tonight we step into a winter night in the year 1276 when snow climbs the roofs, wind claws at wooden shutters, and a bell tower rises above a sleeping medieval town like a stone lighthouse in a sea of white. You are not tucked into a soft modern bed with central heating and a suspiciously loyal phone charger. No. You are climbing into a freezing tower while a blizzard rolls in. So let us be honest, you probably won't survive this with your comfort standards intact. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as always, tell us where you are listening from and what time it is in your little corner of the world now. Dim the lights and imagine the town below you shrinking into dusk. You stand in the churchyard as snow begins to fall more thickly, not in pretty little flakes arranged for a greeting card, but in slanting white streams driven sideways by a wind that seems to have business everywhere at once. It pushes against your cloak, finds the gap at your collar, and reminds you that medieval wool is useful. Yes, but not magical. Your breath drifts pale in front of your face. Your boots press into snow already covering old footprints, cart ruts, frozen mud, and the flattened paths of people who hurried home before the weather grew bold. The bell tower waits above you. It is built of stone that has already seen more winters than most people in the town will ever live. In 1276, many church towers across Western Europe are not only religious structures, but also public instruments. Their bells mark prayer times, work rhythms, danger, death, feast days, curfews, and the ordinary passing of hours in a world where most people do not own clocks. That is a plain and sturdy fact, almost as solid as the blocks rising before you. The tower is not decoration, it is a voice. You look up. The upper openings are dark against the whitening sky. Narrow louvered gaps where sound escapes and weather enters. Somewhere inside hangs the bell, heavy, silent for now, suspended in a frame of timber. It does not need to move to feel present, even asleep. A bell has authority. It waits like an old animal that knows everyone listens when it wakes. Behind you, the town is closing itself for the night. Low houses lean along narrow lanes. Their walls are made from timber, wattle and daub and stone, or whatever local habit and local poverty have agreed upon. Roofs are thatch in some places, tiles in others, weighted now with snow that softens every hard line. Smoke seeps from holes, vents, and chimneys, curling low before the wind tears it apart. The smell is everywhere. Wood smoke, damp straw, cold dung, wet wool, and the faint sour trace of animals kept near human warmth. Romantic not exactly. Historically atmospheric very much so. A woman hurries across the churchyard with her head bent, clutching a basket under her cloak. A boy pulls a reluctant goat toward a shed. Somewhere a door shuts with a flat wooden thud. Another door opens briefly, leaking orange firelight onto the snow, then closes again as if the house has swallowed its own warmth. You hear a dog bark once, then think better of it. Even dogs have limits. The sky darkens into the colour of iron. The year 1276 sits within what many scholars call the High Middle Ages, a period of growing towns, busy markets, expanding churches, and intense local life. Yet that grand phrase does not help your fingers much as they stiffen around the edge of your cloak. Big historical periods are useful from a desk. On a snowy evening, history becomes smaller. It is the scrape of a latch. The ache in your toes, the price of firewood, the question of whether the roof will hold. You move toward the tower door. It is low, thick, and dark, set into the base of the structure with iron hinges that have turned nearly black from use and weather. Snow gathers against the threshold. When you pull, the door resists, then groans open just wide enough to let you slip inside. The sound is not dramatic, not like a castle gate in a heroic story. It is more tired than that. It sounds like old wood complaining about being asked to do one more thing before bed. Inside, the cold changes character. Outside, the wind is wild and moving. Inside, the cold is still, stored in the stone. It touches your cheeks and knuckles with patient confidence. The tower smells of damp mortar, old dust, rope fibre, bird droppings, and the faint dry scent of timber beams high above. The air is shadowy. A little light enters through cracks and from the doorway behind you. But most of the stairwell is already swallowed in grey. You pause before closing the door. Through the opening, the churchyard looks softer now, almost unreal. Snow blurs the graves, the low wall, the path to the square beyond. The town settles into winter darkness, with only small glows from windows and hearths. It is easy to imagine everyone safe below, folded into blankets, whispering prayers or arguing gently over who used too much firewood. But safety in a medieval town is always conditional. A spark can become a fire, a cough can become a household worry, a stranger on the road can become news. The bell above you is part of that uneasy protection. You close the door, the latch falls, now the tower holds you. For a moment you simply stand there and listen. The storm has not vanished. It has changed into a deep muffled pressure, a rushing sound wrapped around the stone. It slips through high openings, trembles along beams, and presses against every seam. The town is below. The bell is above. You are between them. A small breathing thing in a vertical world. A curious little detail from medieval bell culture is that bells were sometimes treated almost like living members of a community. In some regions, they were blessed, named, and believed by ordinary people to have power against storms and demons or bad fortune. A bell might be thought of as having a voice strong enough to trouble the unseen world. Is that theology, folklore, or just humans becoming attached to anything loud enough to argue with thunder? Perhaps all three, because people have always been wonderfully dramatic about useful objects. You take your first step upward. The stair is narrow, curling along the inner wall. Each stone step has been worn by feet, though not smoothly enough to be comfortable. Your hand finds the wall, rough and cold. The spiral draws you slowly away from the door, away from the last square of outside light. You climb into shadow, and the sound of your own breathing becomes a companion. Historians still argue whether rural and small-town bell ringing followed strict written schedules everywhere, or whether much of it depended on local custom, memory, and the habits of particular clergy and ringers. The records are uneven, as records usually are when ordinary people are busy surviving rather than documenting their bedtime routines for future researchers. But you do not need a parchment schedule to understand the power of sound here. When the bell rings, bodies respond. Hands pause over bread dough, men look up from mending tools, children quiet for a moment. The town listens because the town has learned to listen. The higher you climb, the colder the air becomes. Your shoulder brushes the inner curve of the stairwell. Somewhere above, the wooden frame creaks softly. Not from the bell moving, but from the storm working its way through the structure. Snow scratches against the louvers. Wind hums. The tower seems to breathe in long, uneasy pulls. You imagine the town from above, though you cannot see it yet. The market square half buried. The black line of the frozen lane. The roofs gathered around the church like sheep around a shepherd who has seen better weather. Beyond the last houses, fields lie under darkness, and the road disappears into white. Any traveller still outside is now learning a very old lesson. Medieval roads do not care about your plans. Step by step, you leave the ground. The bell tower is not cosy, but it is strangely sheltering. Its stone thickness keeps out the full violence of the storm. Its height lifts you above the ordinary closeness of homes, stables, and streets. Here, the town becomes sound more than sight. A shutter bangs below, a horse stamps, A distant voice calls, then fades. The blizzard answers everything with snow. You keep climbing. The stair bends again. Your foot slips slightly on a damp edge, and you catch yourself against the wall. Very graceful, very dignified, exactly how future generations will imagine medieval resilience. Still, you continue, because the sleeping place for tonight lies near the bells, above the town, where cold air gathers and every sound seems older than language. At last, the stair opens into a small upper chamber. Dark beams cross overhead. The bell hangs nearby in shadow, immense and waiting. The floorboards creak beneath you. Through the louvered openings, snow flashes in the last dim light like ash blown from a pale fire. The town below has nearly vanished. You've entered the tower for the night, and above the sleeping town, the blizzard is only beginning. The chamber receives you with a silence so deep it almost feels like another person standing nearby. You remain still for a few breaths, letting your eyes learn the dimness. The bell is not fully visible at first. It is more like a shape gathered out of shadow, wide at the mouth, narrowing upward into the dark cradle of its yoke. The wooden beams around it look thick enough to hold a sleeping ox, which is comforting, because the bell itself is not a delicate thing. It is a suspended weight of bronze, and you are very aware that your soft, breakable medieval body is standing beneath centuries of engineering confidence. You shift your bundle from one shoulder to the other. The floorboards complain under your boots, not loudly, but enough to remind you that high places are honest about every movement. Below, the stone stair coils back into darkness. Above, hidden rafters vanish into a cold gloom stirred by the storm. The tower is taller than it felt from outside, not because the distance is greater, but because every level has its own mood. Doorway, stairwell, chamber, bell frame. Each step upward has stripped away a little more of the town. You are not in a home. You are not in the church nave. You are in the working throat of the building. Medieval bell towers were often built with practical toughness in mind. Their walls needed to bear weight, resist weather, and carry vibration when the bells rang. The stone, timber, ropes, and openings all worked together so the sound could travel over roofs, fields, lanes, and sometimes miles of countryside. This is one of those simple facts that becomes less simple when you stand inside the structure and imagine the bells swinging. Sound is not invisible here. It is force. It passes through wood, stone, bone, and memory. The wind rises. It pushes through the louvered openings in thin, cold streams. The louvers are meant to let sound out while keeping some rain and snow from coming in. A clever compromise. Though tonight the storm seems offended by compromise, fine snow enters anyway, spinning in the chamber like pale dust. A few flakes settle on the bell's rim, others vanish against the boards. You move toward the wall and set down your small bundle. Inside are the humble comforts of the night: a folded woolen cloak, a scrap of coarse blanket, a heel of bread, perhaps a small flask of ale or watered wine. Depending on who trusted you with it, there may be a bit of cheese wrapped in cloth, hard enough to defend itself in court. None of this is luxurious. But in the tower, above the blizzard, even dry bread begins to look like a personal victory. You sit for a moment on the edge of a beam support. The cold comes up through the boards. It enters slowly, as if taking its time because it knows you cannot escape. Your hands ache first at the fingertips, then your nose, then the small place between your shoulders where damp wool has begun to cool. You tuck your hands under your arms and breathe out carefully. The breath fogs and fades. Fog, fade, silence. Fog, fade, silence. The bell rope hangs nearby. It descends through a hole in the floor, vanishing towards the lower chamber, or perhaps all the way toward the base. Depending on how this particular tower is arranged, it is thick, rough, and darkened by years of palms, dust, smoke, and weather. You do not touch it yet. A rope in a bell tower is not just a rope, it is a command waiting to travel upward. A lesser-known detail from medieval towns is that bell ringing could be physically demanding and sometimes dangerous. A large swinging bell had momentum, and careless handling could injure a ringer or pull them off balance. Later centuries give us clearer records of bell-ringing accidents, but the risk itself is older than the paperwork. You glance at the rope and think, very reasonably, that being launched into a ceiling by public timekeeping would be an undignified way to become local gossip. The tower creaks again. Not a crack, not a warning, just wood shifting in the cold. Still, your imagination becomes very awake. The beams above you have held this bell through seasons of heat, rain, frost, and feast days. They have absorbed the trembling of celebration and alarm. They have listened to births announced indirectly, deaths told solemnly, fires warned, storms endured, and perhaps one or two weddings where half the village pretended not to notice family tensions. Timber remembers in its own way, by bending and darkening and staying. You rise and walk carefully around the bell. The chamber is not large. It is cramped by purpose. There are no grand furnishings, no carved bed, no table for writing poetry about snow, just the bell, the frame, the rope, the cold openings, and the small uneven spaces where a tired person might lean or curl up. Dust gathers in corners. Old feathers lie near a beam. Some bird has nested here before, though wisely not tonight. Even birds, those reckless little philosophers, know when weather has become unreasonable. Outside, the blizzard thickens. You peer through one of the openings. The town below appears in fragments, a roof edge, a smear of lantern light, a pale lane already filling with snow. The square is losing its shape. The well is a dark mark. The churchyard wall is a low ghost line. Beyond that, nothing. The world has been reduced to what the storm permits. It is strange how height changes your sympathy. From the street, you might think only of your own cold feet. From here, you imagine each house as a small sealed vessel of breath and worry. Someone is feeding the last sticks to a hearth. Someone is rocking a child back to sleep. Someone is lying awake, listening to wind, wondering whether the thatch will hold. Someone old is remembering another storm from 30 winters ago. Because elders in every century seem contractually obliged to compare weather. Researchers continue to disagree about how often ordinary laypeople slept inside towers like this. Outside specific duties such as guarding, ringing, or maintenance. Some evidence suggests towers could serve flexible local functions, while other cases were likely stricter, controlled by clergy, parish officers, or civic custom. But tonight, for our quiet journey, you are here because the town needs someone near the bell, and because history has kindly ignored your request for a warmer assignment. You test a sheltered corner. The boards meet the stone wall at a slight angle, creating a space where the wind is less direct. Less direct does not mean warm. It means the cold attacks with better manners. You spread the folded cloak there and press your palm against the floor. Hard, dry enough, splintered in one place. You brush away grit with your sleeve. The bell looms beside you. Its surface is not perfectly smooth. You can see faint casting marks, perhaps a line of inscription, perhaps decorative bands, perhaps nothing more than shadow tricking your tired eyes. Bells in this era might bear religious inscriptions, names of saints, or pleas for protection. If this one has words, they are unreadable in the dimness. Yet the idea of them matters. A bell with words becomes more than metal. It becomes metal with a message. You lean close, not touching it yet, and listen. Of course, it makes no sound, but silence near a bell feels different from silence near a stone. It is a sense with memory inside it. You know what it can become. You will know how it can fill the air and move through sleeping bodies, even now, resting. The bell seems to hold back thunder. A gust slams snow against the louvers. You flinch, then smile at yourself in the dark. very brave, very heroic, frightened by weather-touching wood, but the tower magnifies everything. A loose shutter below becomes a knock. A bird in the rafters becomes a spirit rehearsing. A rope settling becomes a hand where no hand should be. Medieval people did not need weak imaginations to believe in signs and omens. They lived in buildings that performed half the work for them. You wrap the blanket around your shoulders. The town below has almost disappeared now. The hour is somewhere between evening and full night, but without a clock face, without a glowing screen, without the smug certainty of digital numbers. Time softens. You judge it by darkness, by hunger, by the last bell rung, by the habits of prayer, and by how long the cold has been chewing your toes. You sit in your corner, the bell waits. The stair behind you curls downward into the unseen church. The storm surrounds the tower with a steady white pressure. You're high above the sleeping town, close enough to the bell to feel its authority, far enough from the hearths below to miss every tiny comfort you once took for granted. And still, there is something peaceful here. Not easy, not warm, but peaceful. The blizzard hides the world, and the tower holds you in its narrow stone body. You pull the cloak closer, listen to the wind play through the openings, and let your thoughts move slowly, step by step. Like the spiral stair beneath your feet, the bell remains silent. For now, you sit wrapped in wool near the wall, watching the great bronze shape disappear and reappear as drifting snow passes the louvered openings. Every gust changes the light. Every gust reshapes the shadows. The chamber seems alive with tiny movements that are not movements at all, only the restless work of weather. The town below has nearly vanished into darkness. Only a few scattered points of firelight remain visible through the storm. They glow briefly, then disappear behind curtains of snow. Looking down from the tower, you feel oddly separated from the people below. Not because the distance is great, but because height creates its own kind of solitude. You're still part of the town, yet you're also above it. The bell hanging beside you reinforces that feeling. It belongs to everyone. It serves everyone. Yet only a handful of people ever spend much time close to it. You study its shape more carefully. The bronze surface catches faint traces of moonlight hidden behind clouds. Along the shoulder of the bell, you notice raised lettering, perhaps a prayer, perhaps the name of a saint, perhaps the name of the founder who paid for its casting. Medieval bells often carried inscription asking for divine protection or announcing their sacred purpose. A bell was rarely viewed as a simple tool. It occupied a curious space between object and symbol. When it spoke, people listened, and not because the sound was pleasant, because the sound mattered. A widely accepted historical observation is that church bells regulated much of daily life in medieval Europe. Bells announced morning prayers, midday observances, evening curfews, festivals, funerals, emergencies, and important community events. In many towns, the bell tower functioned almost like a public voice that everyone understood. You imagine the sound, not tonight's silence, the ringing, a powerful note rolling across rooftops, echoes bouncing from walls, dogs barking in response, farmers hearing it beyond the town boundaries, travellers on distant roads pausing to listen. The bell could gather attention faster than any messenger. In an age without newspapers, radios, or telephones, sound travelled where written words could not. Outside, the storm presses harder against the tower. A low moan slips through the openings. You glance upward. The timber frame creaks softly. Again, nothing dangerous, just wood responding to cold and wind. Yet in a medieval tower, every sound invites imagination. The people of 1276 live in a world filled with signs, meanings, warnings, blessings, and mysteries. The boundary between practical reality and spiritual interpretation is often thinner than it feels in modern life. A curious tradition found in some parts of medieval Europe involved ringing church bells during severe storms. Many ordinary people believed bell sounds could disperse dangerous weather or drive away harmful supernatural forces associated with thunder and lightning. Did the bells actually influence storms? No. Did communities sincerely believe they helped? Often, yes, and perhaps there is something understandable about that. When faced with overwhelming weather, people naturally search for actions that make them feel less powerless. You shift your position and pull the blanket tighter. The cold continues its patient work. Your feet are the first to complain, then your knees, then your shoulders. Medieval winter comfort is mostly a matter of managing discomfort before it becomes misery. You glance toward the rope again. It hangs motionless beside the bell. Thick, dark, glint. The rope fascinates you because it connects worlds. One end reaches toward the bell, the other disappears downward toward the lives below. Pull the rope, and the entire town hears the result. Few objects possess such authority. A rope, a bell, a tower. Together they become a communication system that has shaped communities for centuries. You wonder about the bell founder. Somewhere, years ago, craftsmen melted copper and tin, prepared moulds, poured glowing metal, and waited for it to cool. Bell casting was highly specialized work. A successful bell required skill, experience, and no small amount of luck. If the casting failed, enormous effort could be wasted. If it succeeded, the bell might serve generations. The very bell beside you may have announced births before you were born. It may continue announcing funerals long after you're gone. That thought feels strangely comforting. The tower reminds you how brief individual lives can be compared to the structures people create together. Snow rattles against the louvers. You lean toward an opening. The view has changed again. The square below is almost completely white. The outlines of buildings appear softened and blurred. Roofs merge with sky. Streets merge with fields. Boundaries dissolve beneath accumulating snow. Only the church itself remains sharply visible from your position because you're standing inside it. Everything else seems to be fading. You imagine families below settling into sleep, a father stretching sore muscles after a day of labour, a mother checking the hearth one final time, children packed together beneath blankets, grandparents murmuring evening prayers, a cat finding the warmest place in the house and defending it with silent determination. Not much changes across centuries when it comes to winter evenings. People still seek warmth, still gather near light, still listen to storms outside and feel grateful for shelter. An interesting little detail appears in several medieval accounts. Cats were often valued not merely as companions, but as practical protectors of stored grain. A successful mouser could save a household from serious food loss during winter months. Some cats were probably aware of their importance, others were simply cats. The distinction has always been blurry. The wind eases briefly. For the first time in hours, a deeper quiet settles around the tower. You listen carefully. Far below, a faint sound rises through the darkness, a door closing, then silence. Later, another sound, perhaps a dog, perhaps a cartwheel shifting under snow, perhaps your imagination. Distance transforms ordinary noises into mysteries. The bell beside you remains still. Its silence begins to feel almost ceremonial. A respected researcher might say that medieval soundscapes differed dramatically from modern ones because they lacked constant mechanical noise. No engines, no electrical hum, no aircraft overhead. The result was a world where individual sounds carried greater significance. A barking dog, a ringing bell, a church chant, a horse crossing stone. Each sound stood out more clearly sitting here. You understand why. Every small noise arrives with remarkable clarity, then fades completely. The tower becomes an instrument of listening. You notice something else among the darkness no longer feels quite as intimidating as before. Perhaps because your eyes have adjusted, perhaps because familiarity reduces fear, or perhaps because the bell itself feels like company. Strange company, admittedly. A massive bronze object that communicates only by being struck, but company nonetheless. There is a certain comfort in sharing space with something enduring. Generations have climbed these stairs, generations have stood where you stand. A number of historians continue to debate whether medieval villagers felt genuine affection toward particular bells or simply respected their practical importance. Evidence exists for both interpretations. Some records suggest strong emotional attachment, while others present bells as primarily functional civic tools. The truth may be somewhere between. People often become attached to things that accompany important moments in life. The bell announces weddings, the bell announces funerals, the bell marks feast days, the bell warns of danger. Over time, its voice becomes woven into memory. Outside, the blizzard resumes its steady assault. Snow sweeps past the openings, wind hums through the chamber. The timber frame answers with low creaks. You settle deeper into your corner. The tower feels colder now, but also more familiar. The bell waits above the sleeping town. The storm circles endlessly around the stone walls, and somewhere below, hidden beneath roofs and blankets, hundreds of people drift into dreams while the great bronze voice of the community rests quietly beside you, gathering silence before the next time it must speak. Below you, the town settles deeper beneath wool, smoke, and snow. From the bell chamber, you cannot see every household clearly, yet your mind begins to place them one by one in the darkness. The tower has lifted you above the roofs, but not above the lives inside them. If anything, the height makes those lives feel more delicate. Each house is a little pocket of warmth pressed against a winter much larger than itself. You shift in your corner and listen. The blizzard moves around the tower with a steady brushing sound, as if someone enormous is sweeping the walls with frozen straw. Through the louvered openings, the square below appears and disappears, a roofline, a chimney, a smear of yellow light, then white again. The town is not gone, only hidden, like a thought beneath sleep. Inside the nearest houses, people are preparing for the long cold hours. One well-documented feature of medieval winter life is that warmth depended heavily on fire, shared body heat, clothing, bedding, and the structure of the household itself. There is no convenient switch on the wall, no glowing thermostat, no polite little radiator humming in the corner. Warmth must be gathered, guarded, rationed, and sometimes argued over. A family may bank the fire carefully before sleep, covering embers with ash so they do not die too quickly. To lose the hearth in hard weather is not just inconvenient, it is a problem with teeth. You imagine a woman kneeling by a low hearth, using an iron tool or a charred stick to settle the embers. Smoke slips upward, not perfectly, because medieval houses often understand ventilation in a loose and optimistic way. The air smells of peat, wood, stale smoke, damp wool, boiled grain, and the faint animal warmth of bodies crowded indoors. Modern noses might object, medieval noses, having fewer alternatives. Negotiate. A child coughs softly in the dark, someone turns it under a blanket. Someone mutters, half asleep, because another foot has found their ribs. Beds are not always private kingdoms in this world. Many ordinary people sleep close together, sometimes on straw mattresses, pallets, benches, or shared bedding. Privacy is a luxury that poverty looks at from a distance and says, "How charming for you." In winter, closeness is practical. It may smell like unwashed wool and last night's onions, but it also keeps people alive. You pull your own cloak tighter and feel suddenly less critical. In the tower, you have space. Too much space, really, down there. The crowded rooms may be smoky and noisy, but they hold warmth in a way this stone chamber refuses to do. The tower gives you height, dignity, and a wonderful view of snow trying to erase civilization. The houses give people soup, blankets, and the possibility of toes that still belong to them by morning. The wind surges again. A low vibration passes through the bell frame. The great bell remains still, but the rope trembles faintly. You watch it sway, almost imperceptibly, and think of the household below measuring the storm not by sight, but by sound. Wind in thatch, snow sliding from a roof, a shutter knocking, a dog whining near the door, the creak of timbers as cold tightens everything. In one home, an older man lies awake near the wall, listening for changes. Medieval people know their buildings intimately. They hear when a beam is stressed, when a roof begins to sag, when a latch is loosened. They understand the moods of wood, clay, straw, and stone, because those materials are not abstract. They are the difference between shelter and exposure. An overlooked detail in some regions is the use of bed curtains, hangings, or enclosed sleeping spaces by those who could afford them. These were not merely decorative, they helped trap warmth and reduce drafts. A fancy bed was not only a status symbol, it was also a small indoor climate system, which sounds less romantic, but possibly more important when your room is doing its best impression of a barn. Most townspeople below you do not sleep in such luxury. They rely on layers, wool, linen, straw, fur if available, old cloaks turned into blankets, a sack folded twice, a dog permitted near the feet because suddenly the dog's personal habits seem less important than its body heat. You smile faintly in the dark. The storm makes philosophers of everyone. Even the proud become practical. Even the tidy reconsider livestock. A gust pushes snow through the opening and dusts the floor near your boot. You brush it away, but more comes in. The tower is not sealed like a house. It breathes too freely. It is built to release sound, not comfort. Every opening that helps the bell speak also lets winter whisper back. Below, food is being guarded as carefully as fire. By 1276, many towns in Europe depend on grain markets, local farms, seasonal storage, and household planning. Bread is central to the diet of ordinary people, while pottage, ale, cheese, onions, beans, peas, and occasional meat or fish fill out the winter table according to region and wealth. In bad weather, every stored loaf matters, every sack of grain matters. Every salted fish sitting in a cold corner has more dignity than it knows. A mother may check a covered pot near the hearth, deciding what can be stretched into morning. A servant may curl near the kitchen space, close enough to the embers to benefit, far enough not to be scolded. An apprentice may sleep above a shop, wrapped in a cloak that smells of leather, flour, metal filings, or dye. A priest may doze in a chamber near the church, waking now and then to listen for the storm. A widow may sit longer than others, counting fuel in her mind. Not all hardship is dramatic. Much of it is arithmetic done silently in the cold. How many sticks remain? How much flour? How long until market? How deep will the snow be by morning? The evidence leaves room for multiple interpretations about how uniformly medieval households prepared for severe winter storms. Wealth, region, architecture, occupation, and local climate all mattered. A stone house in one place, a timber house in another, a hut near the town edge, a merchant's hall by the square. Each faces winter differently, yet the shared pattern is clear enough. People prepare by closing, covering, conserving, and staying near what warmth they have. Your eyes drift toward the town again. The square is empty now. The watchman's route is hidden. The well is nearly buried. A signboard outside an inn swings faintly, though you cannot hear it from here in calmer weather. That inn might hold late voices, cups, gossip, bargains, dice, complaints about prices, and one man who insists he once saw a wolf larger than a pony. Tonight, even exaggeration has gone indoors. Somewhere below, a baby begins crying. You cannot truly hear it, not through the storm, yet you imagine it because winter nights have always contained such sounds. A tired adult lifts the child close, another person grumbles, then softens, the baby's cry fades into the warm, smoky darkness of the room. The town is sleeping, but sleep in this world is not always a single long silence. People wake to tend fires, they wake to pray, they wake because animals move, they wake because cold enters the bedding, they wake because someone else is snoring with heroic commitment, then they drift again. Segmented sleep, with periods of waking during the night, appears in many historical discussions of pre-modern life, though specialists still examine how widespread and consistent these patterns were across class, region, and season. Perhaps some people below wake naturally after a few hours, beat quietly, mend something, pray, or simply stare at the embers. Perhaps others sleep straight through from exhaustion. The past rarely arranges itself neatly for our convenience. You in the tower are not yet asleep. The cold keeps you alert. The bell keeps you company. The town keeps you imagining. You picture each roof as a lowered eyelid. Beneath each one, a different dream forms. Dreams of bread, dreams of summer fields, dreams of debts paid, dreams of saints, dreams of missing relatives, dreams of warm feet, which may be the most reasonable dream of all. The blizzard folds itself over everything. Snow gathers on thatch, stone, cartwheels, fence rails, grave markers, and the churchyard path. It softens the sharp edges of poverty and labour, but only from a distance. Beneath the white covering, life remains hard, tender, practical, and stubborn. You lean your head back against the cold walls. The wool around your shoulders smells of lanolin, smoke, and damp weather. The floor presses firmly beneath you. The bell hangs beside you in patient silence, while below, the sleeping town breathes through 100 small rooms. For now, no one calls for help. No alarm breaks the night. No rope pulls the bell into motion. Only the blizzard moves. Only the tower listens. And you remain awake above the wool-covered town, held between the cold sky and the hidden warmth below. You shift again in your narrow corner, and the floorboards answer with a small dry creak. The sound travels farther than it should. In this tower, every movement becomes noticeable. A boot sole against wood, a breath drawn through cold teeth, the faint scrape of wool on stone. Even your own body seems too loud for the sleeping town below. You begin to understand how the bell ringer's world is built from small attentions, not grand adventures, not shining armour, mostly cold hands, careful timing, sore shoulders, and the strange responsibility of being awake when others are not. The bell hangs near you in patient shadow. Beside it, the rope descends into darkness, thick as a wrist and rough with use. A shorter spare rope lies coiled near a beam. A wooden peg holds an old lantern hook. A small stool sits near the wall, its legs uneven, its surface polished by years of tired bodies taking brief rest. Someone has left a scrap of sacking folded in a corner. Someone else, perhaps long ago, scratched a cross into the wood near the stair opening. It is simple, not decorative. Just 4 rough lines made by a knife point or nail. The bell ringer's belongings are humble. That feels right. This is not a chamber for display. It is a working place, and working places tend to reveal truth. The rope is dark where hands grip it. The boards are worn where feet stand. Dust gathers where no one bothers cleaning because only birds drink, as an unlucky bedtime historians ever notice. Parish life in the 13th century often depended on small paid or semi-paid roles carried out by local people. Bell ringing might be performed by a clerk, sexton, servant of the church, or another trusted person, depending on the town and its custom. The duties could include ringing at set times, helping maintain the church, opening doors, preparing spaces, or assisting clergy. It is not glamorous work, but medieval communities run on many such tasks, quiet jobs that hold public life together while receiving very little poetic applause. You imagine the regular ringer. Perhaps he is older, with thick hands and stiff joints. Perhaps she is a widow entrusted with smaller duties around the church. Perhaps a young man climbs these stairs at dawn, half asleep and entirely resentful of mornings, which is understandable and historically timeless. Whoever usually tends this bell knows the tower in a way visitors never do. They know which step is cracked, which beam groans in wet weather, which opening lets snow in first, which gusts can make the rope stir like something alive. You've only been here a short while, and already the place is teaching you its habits. The wind slips through the louvers and brushes the back of your neck. You turn slightly away from it. There is no perfect corner, only a less offensive one. The tower does not care about your preferences. It was not designed for comfort. It was designed for sound, height, endurance, and the kind of practical inconvenience that medieval builders seem to have accepted with suspicious calm. A peculiar custom associated with church work is that small local privileges sometimes mattered as much as wages. A person responsible for duties around the church might receive food, lodging, clothing allowances, access to certain scraps of income, or rights tied to seasonal offerings, not always, not everywhere, but in many communities. Payment came in mixed forms that would make a modern payroll department quietly walk into the sea. You unwrap the heel of bread from your bundle. It is hard at the crust and slightly damp at one edge. Still, when you bite it, the taste is grounding to grain, smoke, salt from your own fingers, a faint sourness from storage. You chew slowly because there is no reason to hurry, and because the bread gives your mouth something to do besides complain about the cold. A little cheese follows. It is firm, sharp, and stubborn. Medieval food often has that quality. It does not flatter you. It simply exists and expects gratitude. You drink a small mouthful from the flask. The liquid is cold enough to make your teeth ache, but it warms slightly as it settles. If it is ale, it is weak and familiar, safer in many contexts than questionable water, and common in everyday diets. If it is watered wine, then congratulations. You have climbed socially for one sip before returning immediately to shivering in a tower. The storm continues. The bell chamber smells different now that you're eating. Bread and cheese join the older scents of rope, dust, damp burnt stone, and bird feathers. The mixture is oddly comforting. Human presence has a way of changing a place, even when that presence is only a tired person chewing in the dark and trying not to drop crumbs into history. You notice the rope fibres near your knee. They are twisted from plant material, perhaps hemp or flax, toughened by use and weather. Ropes in bell towers take strain, friction, dampness, and dirt. They fray, they stiffen, they need replacement. Nothing in a medieval building is maintenance-free. Stone endures, yes, but roofs leak, timber rots, iron rusts, ropes wear, candles burn down, doors swell, bells crack. The world is held together by repair. That may be one of the great truths of medieval life. Repair is constant. You mend clothes, patch roofs, sharpen tools, replace thatch, resole shoes, rewrap handles, rehang doors, replaster walls. A town is not a finished object. It is an ongoing negotiation with weather, time, hunger, and human clumsiness. Academic opinion remains divided regarding how formerly bell ringers were trained in smaller communities compared with larger churches and urban parishes. Some duties likely passed through practical demonstration rather than written instruction. Someone watched, someone practiced, someone made mistakes while an older person sighed deeply, because apprenticeship has always included the sacred art of being corrected by someone who thinks you should already know better. You look at the bell again. To ring it well, a person must understand rhythm, weight, and timing. Too weak a pull may fail to move the bell properly. Too wild a pull can become dangerous. The rope requires respect. The bell answers force with force. You rub your hands together. The fingertips feel numb at the edges. You tuck them under your arms and hunch forward. The stool near the wall tempts you, so you drag it slightly closer to your sheltered place. Its legs scrape against the boards with a soft rasp. You sit. The stool tilts. You freeze. It settles. You exhale. This is medieval furniture offering a trust exercise no one requested. From this low seat, the chamber feels larger. The bell's mouth hangs above like a dark metal sky. The frame around it is all angles and shadows. The rope drops past your shoulder. Snow flashes in the openings beyond. You imagine long years of people sitting here through different nights. Spring rain, summer heat, autumn mist, winter frost, feast days with bells swinging joyfully, funerals when the sound moves slowly over bowed heads, alarms when the rope is pulled hard and fast, sending fear across the town before anyone knows its cause. The bell ringer witnesses all of it from a strange position, never quite central, never absent. An intriguing detail from some medieval communities is that bells could be rung differently for different occasions. Number, rhythm, timing, and tone might tell listeners whether the sound marked prayer, death, danger, or celebration. To modern ears, bells may blur together beautifully. To local people, familiar patterns could carry meaning, almost like a spoken phrase. You try to imagine learning that language, not from a book, from years of hearing, from childhood, from habit, from the way adults pause and say, that is for the dead, and or that is curfew, or that is fire, get up. The tower is a school of listening. The ringer's small world is poor in comfort but rich in signals. A change in wind, a loosened rope, a different resonance in the bell. Footsteps on the stair, a shout from below, a light in the square, a storm growing stronger. You finish the last crumb of bread. The hunger is not gone, but it is quieter. The cold is not gone either. It never promised to leave. You wrap the blanket around your shoulders again and lean back carefully against the wall. The stone steals warmth through the wool, yet it also supports you. There is a bargain in that. The medieval world is full of bargains like that. Hard floor, but shelter. Smoky room, but heat. Coarse bread, but food. Lonely tower, but purpose. The bell waits beside you. And for the first time tonight, you begin to feel not like a stranger trapped above the town, but like a temporary keeper of a small, necessary world. The storm speaks through the openings. The rope hangs ready, and in the cold chamber, among crumbs, dust, old scratches, and sleeping bronze, you settle into the bell ringer's life for one long winter night. The wind finds every opening. It does not enter the tower all at once. Like a guest with manners, it arrives in narrow currents, slipping through the louvered gaps, curling around beams, brushing the bells, and wandering across the floorboards until it finds your ankles. There it settles with the quiet satisfaction of something that has discovered exactly where you are weakest. You draw your feet closer beneath the blanket. The bell chamber has changed since you first climbed into it. At dusk, it felt like a stone room holding a storm outside. Now it feels more like the storm has learned the shape of the room and is playing it carefully, note by note. The louvers are meant to serve the bell. Their angled wooden slats help sound pass outward while reducing the direct entry of rain and snow. That is the tidy explanation. Tonight, however, the blizzard treats them as suggestions. Snow still threads through in fine white lines. It dusts the boards, settles on the sill, and melts slowly where your breath or body warmth has touched the air. You watch one flake land on the rope and cling there, bright for a moment before vanishing into the fibre. The tower hums, not loudly, not musically in any graceful courtly way. It's more like the low tone of a giant bottle when someone blows across its mouth, except the bottle is made of stone. timber, and poor decisions about sleeping arrangements. You sit still and listen. The wind has layers. A high hiss enters through the narrowest cracks. A lower moan rolls through the wider openings. Sometimes a sudden gust makes the louvers clatter. The sound jumps through the chamber like a startled bird, and the bell itself remains quiet. Yet its presence changes everything. The moving air slips around its bronze body, and you imagine the bell feeling the storm without answering. Builders of medieval towers often had to balance competing needs: height for sound, openings for resonance, strength for the weight of bells, and enough protection to keep the structure usable through bad weather. Surviving towers reveal this practical intelligence in stone and timber. They are not fragile ornaments, they are machines of height and sound, built before machines had to look like iron gears and wheels. You reach toward one of the beams and touch the wood. It is cold, but not like stone. Stone feels ancient and indifferent. Wood feels as if it once knew sunlight. The grain under your fingers is uneven, rough in places, polished in others by hands and ropes and time. You press your palm flat against it and feel a faint tremor as another gust passes through the tower. The whole chamber answers the weather. The boards shift, the rope stirs, the bell frame creaks, the louvers knock softly against their fittings. Outside, snow moves sideways in quick pale streaks. There is a curious belief found in some medieval communities that bells could purify air or protect a town during storms, sickness, or spiritual danger. Some people even imagined their sound as a weapon against invisible threats. It seems strange to modern ears, until you sit in this dark tower and feel how powerful a bell's silence is before it speaks. Then the idea becomes less silly. Not scientifically correct, no, but emotionally understandable. A loud enough sound can feel like courage. You lean closer to the nearest opening. Cold immediately bites your face. Below, the town is almost impossible to see. The roofs are shapes beneath the snow. The lane from the churchyard to the square has disappeared. A lantern near the inn flickers once, then is swallowed by the moving white. The storm has erased distance. The edge of the town and the edge of the world seem to have become the same thing. Wind rushes upward along the tower wall. For a moment it carries the smell of smoke. That scent reaches you faintly, almost tenderly. Hearth smoke from the houses below, torn apart and lifted into the storm. It mingles with damp stone and old rope. You breathe it in and feel a sudden ache of homesickness for rooms that are not even yours. The sound through the louvers changes again. Now there is a pulse to it, a swelling, fading rhythm. It reminds you of breathing, though not human breathing, something larger, slower, older. The weather moves in waves across the town and strikes the tower differently each time. One gust comes from the west and sings through the slats. Another curls from the north and presses against the stone like a shoulder. Another drops snow straight down for a few seconds, and the silence that follows feels almost shocking. You begin to understand why people listen to buildings. Modern life surrounds people with so many steady noises that wind often becomes background. Here, it is a visitor, a messenger, a warning, a companion, an annoyance, and occasionally a rude hand under the blanket. In a medieval tower, where there is not scenery, it is an active force in the room, or sinur. The surviving evidence does not let us say with certainty how every community interpreted the sounds of towers in storms. Some may have heard ordinary weather, others may have heard omens, spirits, saints, or the displeasure of heaven. The interpretation likely depended on local teaching, personal experience, fear, memory, and the kind of imagination that grows easily in cold darkness. You rub your arms slowly. The movement creates a little warmth, not much, enough to persuade your body not to file a formal complaint. Your breath drifts in front of you with each exhale. The cloud appears, expands, then vanishes, again and again. It becomes another rhythm in the chamber. gentler than the wind, smaller than the tower, but yours, a loose feather rolls across the floor. It travels in a hesitant line, stops near the bell rope, then tumbles forward when the next draft comes. You watch it with unreasonable interest. After hours in a tower, even a feather becomes entertainment. This is what happens without taverns, books, cards, or a warm bed. Medieval boredom does not arrive empty. It arrives with a feather and asks you to appreciate it. You smile in spite of the cold. The feather reaches a crack between two boards and rests there. A perfect little journey, a tiny pilgrimage across the bell chamber. The wind rises sharply. This time the bell rope sways enough to cast a moving shadow. Your body tightens before your thoughts catch up. For one breath, you imagine the bell beginning to move on its own. Of course it does not. It hangs still, obedient to weight and physics rather than ghost stories. But the thought passes through you anyway. A medieval person might not dismiss it so quickly. In a world where churches, relics, saints, dreams, weather, and death all belong to the same moral universe, unexplained movement could carry meaning. A rope stirring in the wind might simply be a rope stirring in the wind, or it might be mentioned the next morning with just enough seriousness to make others cross themselves. You shift back from the opening. The tower feels less like a room than an instrument now. The storm draws sound from it without permission. Stone supplies the hollow body, timber supplies the creak, louvers supply the whistle, rope supplies the faint rasp, snow supplies the soft patter, your breathing supplies the smallest note, and the bell waits. That waiting becomes part of the music. You think of the town below, hearing only the muffled outer voice of the blizzard. People in their beds may not know how many sounds are being made above them. They do not hear the rope's small movement, the feather's path, the beams answering the wind. They sleep under the protection of a tower that is not asleep at all. Your fingers brush the edge of the bell's shadow. You do not touch the bronze yet. Somehow it feels better to wait. The night is long and the Cibele has its own patience. For now, the storm plays through the louvered openings, turning the tower into a cold wooden flute, a stone throat. A winter instrument is above the town. You sit inside its music, wrapped in wool, listening as the blizzard teaches every beam, crack, rope, and shutter how to sing in darkness. At some point, without any bell announcing it, evening becomes night. The change arrives so gradually that you almost miss it. The last traces of twilight disappear behind the storm. The snow beyond the louvered openings no longer glows silver. It becomes a moving darkness filled with pale fragments. The town below vanishes completely. You are left with sound, the wind, the creak of timber, the faint whisper of drifting snow, your own breathing, and somewhere far below, hidden beneath roofs and blankets, the sleeping pulse of the town. You pull the wool blanket higher around your shoulders and settle more firmly into your corner. The bell chamber has become familiar enough that your eyes can now find shapes in the darkness without effort. The rope, the stool, the beam with the old scratch marks, the bell itself, looming quietly above you. It feels strange to think that people below are measuring this night differently. You measure it by cold, though, by sounds, by shadows, by waiting. Many townspeople measure it by sleep. Yet even sleep in 1276 is not always the uninterrupted experience modern people expect. Written accounts from later medieval and early modern periods that suggest that nighttime could be divided into phases. People sometimes woke naturally after several hours, tended fires, prayed, spoke quietly, or completed small tasks before returning to bed. Exactly how widespread these habits were remains difficult to determine, but the idea reminds you that nighttime was often more active than we imagine. The clockless hours possess their own rhythm. Nobody glances at a glowing screen. Nobody checks whether it is the 11:43 or 2:17. Time is sensed rather than counted. A fire burns lower, a candle shortens. The body grows tired, The stomach grows empty. The bell rings. Life moves forward. You find yourself wondering how different that feels from modern existence. Perhaps slower, perhaps more uncertain, yet maybe also more immediate. Without clocks everywhere, people pay closer attention to natural signals. Darkness itself becomes information. Temperature becomes information. Sound becomes information. The tower encourages this kind of awareness. Every few minutes, you notice something new. A draft moving across your left hand, snow gathering on a sill, the rope turning slightly, the bell frame settling with a soft groan. The chamber seems full of tiny events that would disappear beneath modern noise. A forgotten detail from medieval life is how dark darkness could truly be. In towns without electric lighting, night transformed familiar places. Streets, fields, churches, and homes became entirely different environments after sunset. Even a location known intimately during the day could feel mysterious after dark. You understand that now. The town below might as well be another country. You know it exists. You know people sleep there, yet you cannot see them. The storm has erased visual certainty. A gust strikes the tower. The louvers rattle sharply. You instinctively glance upward. For a brief moment, the bell seems larger than before, not because it has moved, but because the darkness around it shifts. Shadows slide across the bronze surface. The bell emerges, then retreats again. You imagine what it must feel like when the great instrument finally rings, the force, the vibration, the sound filling the chamber. For now, however, silence reigns, the bell waits, you wait, the night continues. Somewhere below, a dog begins barking. The sound reaches you only faintly through the storm. One bark, another, then nothing. Perhaps a traveller passed through the square. Perhaps another dog offered an opinion. Perhaps the animal simply remembered an urgent matter from earlier and decided everyone should know about it immediately. Dogs have remained remarkably consistent across centuries. The wind shifts direct. A different scent arrives. Wood smoke, not much, just enough to notice. The smell drifts through the louvers and curls around the chamber. It carries thoughts of hearths, cooking pots, sleeping families, and rooms warmer than this one. Your stomach considers the possibility of additional bread. Your bread supply firmly disagrees. You settle for another sip from the flask. The liquid is cold but welcome. Outside, snow continues falling. Winter weather played a major role in shaping medieval life. Travel slowed, markets could be disrupted, roads became difficult, communication between settlements grew more complicated. A storm like tonight's would not merely inconvenience people, it could alter plans for days. The town beneath you has effectively withdrawn into itself. Doors are shut, animals are sheltered, fires are tended. People wait. Winter encourages patience because winter rarely listens to complaints. You rest your head lightly against the wall. The stone feels cold even through your hood. Yet fatigue is beginning to soften the edges of discomfort. Not enough to make you comfortable. Just enough to make stillness appealing. The rope sways slightly again. You watch it for a while. Its movement is almost hypnotic. Back and forth, a few inches at most. Then stillness, then movement again, like a pendulum measuring time no one has bothered to count. Researchers examining medieval daily life often encounter a challenge. Ordinary routines leave fewer records than extraordinary events. Fires, wars, disputes, and royal decisions generate documents. Quiet nights spent waiting beside bells generate far fewer, yet those quiet nights were far more common. History often survives through exceptions. Life mostly happened through repetitions. That thought lingers with you. The bell chamber is not witnessing anything famous tonight. No king arrives, no battle unfolds, no miracle appears. A storm passes over a sleeping town, a bell waits, a tired person keeps watch. And somehow that feels important too. The ordinary deserves attention. The thousands of unnoticed nights across centuries helped build the world as surely as dramatic events did. The storm briefly eases. The difference is immediate. The tower grows quieter, not silent, just softer. Without the constant pressure of wind, new sounds emerge. A faint creak overhead, the distant settling of timber, the soft rustle of your blanket, the almost imperceptible hiss of falling snow. You close your eyes for a moment, not sleeping, just listening. The tower becomes larger when your eyes are shut. You can sense the height above, the stair descending below, the bell suspended nearby, the town scattered beneath the darkness, everything connected through stone, wood, rope, and memory. One unusual belief recorded in some medieval communities suggested that certain bells possessed individual personalities. A bell might be described as cheerful, mournful, stubborn, or powerful. To modern thinking, this sounds whimsical, yet after spending hours beside one, you begin to understand the impulse. The bell feels distinctive, not alive, not magical, simply familiar. A presence, a companion in the darkness. The wind returns. The chamber resumes its low music. You pull the blanket closer and glance once more through the nearest opening. Nothing is visible now beyond swirling snow. The world has become wonderfully small, a bell chamber, a storm, a sleeping town hidden beneath winter. The clockless hours continue their slow journey toward morning, measured not by numbers but by breath, cold, memory, and the patient waiting of bronze high above the roofs. For now, there is nowhere else to be. And strangely, that feels peaceful. The rope is no longer just hanging in the darkness. It has become the thing your eyes return to, again and again. Perhaps because it moves when the wind moves. Perhaps because it disappears through the floor into the unseen lower levels. Or perhaps because it is the only object in the chamber that seems ready to act. The bell waits with heavy patience. The beams endure. The stone walls listen. But the rope suggests decision. Pull, and the night changes. Leave it, and the town sleeps on. You lean forward from your corner and study it more closely. The fibres are rough, twisted tight, darkened by years of hands and weather. Near the place where someone usually grips it, the surface is smoother, almost polished. Higher up, where colder air moves through the chamber, thin crystals of frost have formed along the strands. They catch the dim light from the snow outside and glimmer faintly. Like salt, you reach toward it, slowly. There is no need to be dramatic, though your fingers apparently disagree, because they hesitate just before touching the rope. Medieval bell ropes are not sacred relics, generally speaking, but this one has gathered the weight of many mornings, warnings, funerals, feasts, and probably several sleepy mistakes. It deserves a little respect. At last, your fingertips close around it. The cold shocks you. Not sharp like metal, but deep and fibrous, as if the rope has stored the whole tower's winter inside itself. Frost crunches lightly beneath your hand. The fibres bite into your skin. You release it almost immediately and tuck your hand under the blanket, because your courage has limits, and apparently those limits are measured in rope temperature. Still, you have touched the voice of the town. That is what it feels like. A rope, yes, but also a line between silence and sound. Across much of medieval Europe, bells did not simply mark religious time. They could summon people to worship, warn of fire, signal curfew, announce deaths, or call attention to civic danger. The same object that invited prayer could also wake a town in fear. Standing with your fingers still tingling, you understand how much trust rests in something so ordinary. The rope sways gently, sir. You imagine the path of force. A hand pulls, the rope tightens, the movement travels upward. The bell shifts in its frame. The clapper strikes bronze. Sound bursts outward through the louvers and falls over the town like invisible weather. That is the beautiful part. Also, frankly, the alarming part. Because if you pull wrongly, too hard, too suddenly, or at the wrong time, You do not merely make a noise, you disturb everyone. You frighten children, you wake dogs, you annoy the priest, you confuse the watchman. You possibly begin tomorrow as the least popular person in the parish, which is a difficult social position in a small town where everyone knows who borrowed whose bucket. You flex your fingers to warm them. The rope's cold remains in your skin. The frost on it makes sense. Warm air from bodies below may rise through the tower, meet freezing currents entering the bell chamber, and leave moisture clinging to fibres, wood and stone. Oh, overnight, that moisture freezes. The tower is not merely cold and virtuose. It is a small weather system stacked vertically above the church. You look down at the hole in the floor where the rope vanishes. Darkness gathers there. Somewhere below, the rope may pass through another chamber, perhaps near the nave, perhaps toward a ringing area where the regular ringer stands. Tower arrangements vary from place to place. Some bells are rung from ground level, others from intermediate rooms, some by swinging the bell, others by striking or chiming it. The exact method depends on local design, size, custom, and period. Specialists still debate how quickly more complex bell ringing practices spread across different regions, and how much smaller communities adapted methods from larger churches. The record is uneven. Surviving towers, later manuals, parish accounts, and physical traces all offer clues, but not a complete script. The past rarely hands us a neat instruction booklet, probably because it knew we would ask too many follow-up questions. You lean back and watch the rope. It sways again, only slightly. The storm is touching it through the tower, That movement makes you think about fear. Not sudden terror, the quieter kind, the kind that grows when responsibility sits beside you in the dark. If something happens below, if someone sees flame, if raiders appear on the road, if a roof collapses, if someone calls from the churchyard, this rope may become urgent. Your tired hand may be expected to pull, your body in half moons, numb and poorly rested, may be asked to make the bell speak clearly. No pressure, just the safety of an entire sleeping town dangling from a frozen rope near your knee. You smile faintly at the absurdity of it. Then the wind cuts through the chamber and your smile vanishes into your collar. You touch the rope again, more firmly this time. The frost breaks under your palm. Fibres press into your skin. You give it the smallest test pull, barely enough to tighten it. Above, the bell does not move, but the rope answers with tension. It is connected, alive with potential. You release it. The rope swings back and settles. A small sound rises from above, perhaps the faintest shift of metal or wood. You freeze and listen. Nothing follows. The bell has not rung. Good. Waking a town by accident would be a bold contribution to history, but not one you need tonight. One curious feature of medieval bell culture is that some bells were believed to have protective names or identities, often linked with saints. People might speak of a bell almost as if it had a personality, a duty, even a kind of spiritual strength in certain places. Bells were baptized in ceremonies involving holy water, incense, and prayers. It is a strange thought. This heavy bronze neighbour of yours treated almost like a member of the community. Yet, after sitting beside it all night, you are beginning to understand the emotional logic. The bell does not merely hang here. It belongs here. The rope does too. The rope is the humble part of the arrangement, the thing touched by ordinary hands. Bronze may be cast with inscriptions and blessings. Stone may rise proudly over the town. But the rope receives sweat, dirt, frost, skin, and urgency. It is where human effort meets public sound. You look at your palm. Tiny rope marks cross the serre. They fade slowly. Outside, snow keeps falling. The tower's openings flash with moving white, then darkness, then white again. The storm seems less angry now, but more persistent. It has settled into long work. It is filling lanes, covering carts, smoothing grave markers, sealing doors, pressing down on roofs. Below, the town depends on many fragile things: embers under ash, latch hooks, thatch bindings, stored grain, shared blankets. A watchman's eyes, a bell rope that must not fail. Ropes could wear, swell with damp, stiffen in frost, or fray from repeated use. In a place like this, maintenance would matter. Someone must notice damage before an emergency. Someone must replace what is weakening. A town's alarm system may look solemn from the outside, but up close it is made of perishable materials and responsible habits. You shift your blanket and settle your back against the wall again. The cold has entered your fingers from touching the rope, and now it travels through your hand in slow pulses. You breathe into your cupped palms. The warmth is brief, still. Brief warmth is warmth. Medieval survival often seems to run on small victories stacked carefully together. A dry place to sit, a little bread, a cloak that still blocks some wind, a rope that holds, a bell that waits. The chamber grows quiet for several breaths. Even the storm softens. In that hush, you imagine the bell rope during different moments, pulled at dawn by a sleepy ringer with cold hands, pulled at noon when the town smells of baking and animals and market mud, pulled during a funeral while black cloth moves slowly through snow, pulled in panic when firelight glows where firelight should not be. Each pull becomes memory, each sound enters lives below. Tonight, however, the rope hangs frosted and still. You're grateful for that. No alarm, no flames, no desperate shouting, only the long winter night, the patient bell, and your careful hands learning the cold language of the rope. You let your eyes close briefly, while the rope sways in the dark beside you, holding its silence like a promise. Your eyes close for only a moment, at least. That is what it feels like. When you open them again, the bell chamber appears unchanged. The rope still hangs beside you. Snow still drifts beyond the louvers. The bell still waits in shadow, yet something has shifted. The night feels deeper now, heavier somehow, as though the storm has settled over the town like another blanket. You stretch your fingers carefully. The joints complain. Your shoulders complain. Your back offers several detailed opinions on medieval furniture. The stool beneath you has become less comfortable with every passing hour, which is an impressive achievement considering it was never comfortable to begin with. You rise slowly. The movement sends warmth back into your legs. Pins and needles dance through your feet. You walk a short circle around the chamber, careful not to trip over anything in the darkness. The boards creak softly beneath your boots. As you move, you begin listening again, not to the tower this time, to the town. Or rather, to the hints of the town. The storm muffles almost everything. Yet now and then small sounds climb through the darkness. A distant thud, a faint bark, something metallic striking once and then falling silent. Each noise arrives softened by snow and distance. Each noise feels important. You pause beside one of the openings and peer outward. Nothing, only swirling darkness. Still, your imagination fills the empty somewhere below. A stable horse shifts its weight and stamps against frozen ground. Somewhere a dog curls tighter beside a hearth. Somewhere a baby wakes briefly before being soothed back to sleep. Somewhere a tired watchman adjusts his cloak and wonders whether dawn has forgotten its responsibilities. The town may be invisible, but it remains alive. Contemporary accounts from medieval communities often reveal how closely people lived alongside animals. Horses, dogs, chickens, geese, pigs, cattle, and goats formed part of daily life. Their sounds shaped the nighttime environment just as much as human voices did. You imagine those sounds hidden beneath the storm. A horse snorting in a stable, a cow shifting against wooden boards, a dog growling softly at some imagined threat. The sounds would be familiar to anyone living here. A town was not silent after dark, it merely became quieter. You lean against a beam and listen harder. A faint voice reaches you. Or perhaps it does. The wind can play tricks. The sound might be a person calling across a yard. It might be a loose shutter. It might be the storm itself squeezing through a narrow space. You wait for it to repeat. It does not. The mystery remains unsolved. That seems appropriate. The night is full of mysteries. A small detail tucked away in various medieval records is the presence of night travellers who occasionally arrived after town gates were closed or households had settled for sleep. Delayed merchants, messengers, pilgrims, labourers, and wanderers sometimes found themselves seeking shelter in difficult conditions. You picture one such traveller now, a lone figure wrapped in snow, boots heavy with slush, face stinging from wind, searching desperately for light, searching for a door still willing to open. The thought makes your tower seem slightly more welcoming than it did an hour ago. Not warm, certainly not warm, but sheltered, and shelter matters. Another sound rises from below. This one is easier to identify. A bell. Not your bell. A much smaller one, perhaps attached to a stable door, perhaps hanging from an animal, perhaps moved accidentally by the wind. The faint ringing reaches the tower and fades almost immediately. You smile. For a brief moment, one bell has spoken to another. The great bronze giant beside you remains silent. Its smaller cousin handles the conversation alone. The wind changes direction again. A stronger gust pushes through the louvers. Snow sprays across the floor. You pull your hood tighter and retreat from the opening. The storm is not finished with its performance. Far from it, outside. Winter continues reshaping the town. Paths disappear. Tracks vanish. Fence lines soften. The world becomes smoother and quieter with each passing hour. Researchers studying medieval weather records and chronicles and agricultural documents have long noted the importance of seasonal conditions in shaping daily life. Severe winters could influence travel, trade, food supplies, and local routines far beyond the duration of a single storm. Tonight's blizzard is one event among countless others, yet for the people experiencing it, it feels enormous. That is the nature of weather. It is always happening now. You walk slowly toward the stair opening. Darkness descends below. The spiral staircase disappears after only a few turns. You listen. Nothing. No footsteps. No voices. No movement. Just the low murmur of wind filtering upward through the tower. The church below sleeps as deeply as the town itself. You return to your corner. The blanket feels slightly warmer now. Not because conditions have improved, because your body has adapted. Humans possess a remarkable ability to normalize discomfort given sufficient time. You suspect medieval people developed this skill to a level modern audiences would find deeply concerning. Another curious feature of historical nighttime life involves storytelling. Long winter evenings often provided opportunities for tales, legends, local gossip, family histories, and cautionary stories. Before widespread literacy and entertainment technologies, conversation itself became a valuable form of recreation. You imagine the houses below. Perhaps some families spoke before sleep. Perhaps children asked questions. Perhaps grandparents repeated stories everyone already knew by heart. The same tale told for the 100th time. The same dramatic wolf. The same heroic ancestor. The same suspicious neighbour. Every generation inherits stories alongside blankets and cooking pots. The thought feels comforting. The tower itself probably contains stories too. How many people have stood here during storms? How many have watched snow bury the square? How many have listened to the bell waiting in darkness? No written list survives to answer. Most of their names are gone, yet traces remain. The worn boards, the scratched beam, the polished rope, the tower remembers even when documents do not. The question remains open to interpretation. But some historians suggest that medieval communities often developed strong emotional attachments to familiar places, not because those places were comfortable, but because they were dependable. Reliability carried enormous value in uncertain times. The bell tower certainly qualifies. It stands through storms, through seasons, through generations. People come and go. The tower remains. A sudden gust rattles the louvers hard enough to make you flint. For an instant, snow swirls through the opening like a cloud of white sparks. Then the wind passes. The chamber settles again. You laugh quietly at yourself. The tower has been teaching you all night. Every sound becomes meaningful. Every shadow becomes suspicious. Every movement attracts attention. In a strange way, you've begun thinking like the people who once spent long hours here, listening, watching, waiting. The storm outside continues its endless work. The sleeping town breathes beneath snow, somewhere far below, hidden beyond sight. Ordinary lives continue in darkness. A watchman walks, a dog dreams, a child turns beneath a blanket, an ember glows red beneath ash, and high above them all, you remain awake beside the silent bell, gathering the faint voices of the town as they drift upward through the blizzard. Small reminders that even in the deepest hours of winter, life never truly falls silent. The stair opening waits beside you like a dark well. For a long while, you ignore it. The bell chamber has become your little world of rope, frost, bronze, and wind, yet the church below begins to pull at your thoughts, not loudly. It simply rests beneath you, vast and quiet, carrying the tower the way a sleeping body carries a dreaming head. You stand slowly. Your knees are stiff from cold, and your boots feel heavy. You gather the blanket around your shoulders and take one careful step toward the spiral stair. The air rising from below is still cold, but different from the air in the bell chamber. Less sharp, less restless. It smells faintly of wax, old stone, damp wood, and the ghost of incense. You place one hand against the wall and begin descending. The stairs curve tightly, each step worn at the centre by generations of feet. The stone is slick in places where damp has gathered. Your hand slides along the wall, feeling rough patches, old mortar, small chips, and the occasional shallow groove where someone may have dragged a tool or scratched a mark long before you climbed here. The tower's sounds change as you go down, above. The wind continues to whistle through the louvers, but the note grows softer with each turn song. The bell chamber recedes. The storm becomes muffled. Your own footsteps take over, slow and hollow on stone. Step, breath, step, breath. The descent feels longer than it should, perhaps because darkness stretches distance. At last, the stair opens near the upper edge of the church interior, and you pause before moving fully into the nave. The space below is enormous compared with the cramped chamber above. Even in darkness, you feel it. The church is not empty in the way a room is empty. It is empty in a gathered, listening way. The roof beams rise unseen overhead. Stone columns stand in rows like patient figures. The nave stretches forward, pale where snowlight leaks through narrow windows. The altar lies farther ahead in deeper shadow, where a small lamp may still glow, faint as an ember guarding a secret. Medieval churches were often among the largest and most enduring buildings in a town. They served religious purposes first, of course, but they also shaped community identity, local gatherings, rhythms of work, charity, burial, memory, and social order. In a small town, the church was not just visited on holy days, it was woven into the emotional and practical map of life. You step into the nave. The floor is colder than the tower boards. Stone holds the winter with great seriousness. Your breath appears again, softer here, drifting through the dark like a small prayer that forgot its words. The smell of wax grows stronger. Beneath it lies damp stone, old rushes, wood smoke carried in on clothing, and the faint earthy scent of the churchyard beyond the walls. You listen. The silence here is different. Above, silence waited beside the bell. Here, silence kneels, It gathers beneath arches, it rests along benches and walls, it pools in corners where daylight rarely reaches even in summer. Every sound you make seems slightly inappropriate, as if the church has been asleep and you are walking through its dream. You move carefully along the nave. There may be benches in some areas, or simple open space depending on the church and local practice. The neat rows of later pews are not yet universal in this century. People may stand, kneel, move, gather, separate by custom, and arrange themselves according to social expectation. The interior is not the tidy arrangement a modern visitor might imagine. It is a living space of worship, hierarchy, habit, and use. Your fingers brush the edge of a wooden chest. The wood is cold and slightly sticky with age. Perhaps it holds vestments, candles, cloths, records, or items belonging to the parish. Perhaps it is locked. Perhaps several people argue about who has the key, because wherever there is a locked chest, human society eventually becomes suspicious. Near a wall, you notice a faint painted figure emerging from darkness. A saint, perhaps. A fragment of colour, a hand raised in blessing. A robe once bright, now muted by smoke, age, and poor lighting. Many medieval church interiors were more colourful than bare surviving stone sometimes suggests. Painted walls, images, hangings, candles, and ritual objects could create a rich visual world. The plain grey medieval church in the modern imagination is often the result of later damage, reform, weathering, and time. Tonight, in the darkness, only traces remain visible, but even traces have powers. You move closer to the chancel screen, or what your imagination makes of it in the gloom. Wooden divisions, rails, steps, or screens help structure sacred space. The altar beyond is not simply a table, it is the spiritual centre of the building. Even in near darkness, the arrangement guides your body. You slow down without deciding to. This is a place where people have whispered hopes they could not afford to say aloud elsewhere. A good harvest, a safe birth, a child's fever breaking, a debt forgiven, a traveller returning, a soul remembered. The storm outside feels far away for a moment. Then a gust presses against the church walls, and the whole building gives the slightest shudder. Not visibly, more like a change in pressure. Snow hisses against high windows. Somewhere a loose shutter or panel taps once, twice, then stills. Hidden behind the larger story of worship is the simple fact that churches were also cold, very cold. Stone churches in winter could be difficult spaces to endure for long periods, especially for the poor, the elderly, or anyone expected to attend services without generous clothing. Devotion did not cancel drafts. Holiness did not warm toes. Saints may have inspired courage, but they were not known for distributing socks. You stand in the nave and understand this perfectly. The church below breathes quietly, but its breath is cold. You pull the blanket tighter. In the faint light, you see the suggestion of graves or memorial slabs beneath foot. Depending on the local arrangement, the dead are not far from the living in this world. Burials cluster around the church, memories cling to walls, names may be carved, painted, spoken, or already forgotten. The records are often too fragmentary to tell us exactly how every parish used every corner of its church at night. Some spaces were carefully controlled. Others might be used flexibly under local need. A storm, a vigil, a duty, a watch, a sheltering body, all could alter the ordinary pattern. Medieval buildings lived by rule, but also by circumstance. You pause near a pillar. Its surface is cold under your palm. The stone feels less hostile here than in the tower. Perhaps because the nave is wider. Perhaps because the darkness seems gentler. Perhaps because the church holds centuries of human attention, and human attention changes a place. You imagine the day, people entering with wet shoes, children fidgeting, voices murmuring, candles burning, a priest chanting, an old woman crossing herself. a merchant standing where others can see his respectable cloak, a poor labourer drifting near the back, a child staring upward at painted figures and trying not to be noticed. Now all of that is gone. Only the building remains. The church is sleeping, yet not empty. Its silence contains the shapes of all those daily presences. Above you, the bell waits in the tower. Below you, the nave keeps its cold watch. The blizzard folds itself around the roof and walls, but here inside the storm arrives only as pressure, whisper, and faint vibration. You stand in the dark church for a few more breaths, letting the stillness settle over you like a second cloak. Then you turn back toward the stair. The tower is calling you upward again, not with sound, with duty, with cold, with the patient presence of the bell. You begin to climb, leaving the nave to its quiet breathing, carrying with you the scent of wax and stone as the spiral stair curls back toward the storm above. By the time you return to the bell chamber, the cold feels almost familiar, not pleasant, not welcome, but familiar. The wind greets you immediately, slipping through the louvers with renewed determination. Snowflakes drift across the floorboards in pale wandering lines. The bell hangs exactly where you left it, silent and enormous. While the rope sways with the smallest movements of air, you settle back into your corner. The blanket wraps around your shoulders once more. The tower creaks softly, and your thoughts drift downward, past the church roof, beyond the churchyard, into the houses scattered beneath the storm. The town is sleeping, or trying to. Winter nights are not always cooperative. You picture a narrow timber house near the market square. The fire has burned low, leaving a bed of glowing embers beneath grey ash. The room smells of smoke, wool, damp boots, and supper. A family lies close together beneath blankets stuffed with straw, wool, or whatever material fortune has provided. The bedding is rarely luxurious, yet comfort is a relative thing. After a day spent hauling wood, carrying water, tending animals, mending tools, or standing in a drafty workshop, even a straw mattress can feel remarkably inviting. Many medieval households relied on mattresses filled with straw, chaff, feathers, or other locally available materials. Wealthier homes might enjoy softer bedding, while poorer families often worked with whatever could provide insulation from cold floors and winter air. You imagine the sounds inside such a house. A child breathing through a slightly blocked nose, the faint crackle of embers, the rustle of blankets, someone snoring with absolute confidence. Outside, snow piles against the walls. Inside, warmth gathers around sleeping bodies. The contrast feels almost magical. Not because the house is particularly comfortable by modern standards, because survival often depends on small differences. A few degrees warmer, a thicker blanket, a better roof, a stronger door. Winter has a way of making modest advantages feel enormous. You adjust your position against the wall. The rough stone presses through the blanket, far below. Another household occupies your thoughts. This one belongs to a baker. Tomorrow's bread already waits in preparation. Perhaps dough rests beneath cloth. Perhaps sacks of grain stand stacked against a wall. Perhaps the baker himself sleeps lightly, knowing he must rise long before sunrise. In towns like this, many working lives begin in darkness. The morning bell does not create activity. It joins activity already underway. A baker, blacksmith, brewer, miller, and countless others may greet the day before much of the town opens its eyes. A lesser-known aspect of medieval sleep is how strongly occupation could shape daily rhythms. Different trades demanded different schedules, particularly during winter when daylight remained precious. The storm rattles the louvers. You glance outward. Nothing but swirling white. The world beyond the tower has disappeared again. So you continue your quiet journey through the sleeping homes below. Near the edge of town, a widow lies awake. Perhaps she worries about fuel. Perhaps she worries about money. Perhaps she worries about nothing in particular and simply cannot sleep. People in every century share this experience. The body grows tired, the mind becomes energetic at precisely the wrong moment. Outside the window, a blizzard. Inside the room, an inventory of every concern accumulated during the previous month. Humanity has shown remarkable consistency in this regard. Another home comes to mind, a merchant's household. The blankets are thicker, the room is larger, the food stores more secure, yet wealth does not silence storms. The wind still pushes against shutters. The roof still groans under snow. Children still wake from bad dreams. Even the prosperous listen differently when winter becomes serious. The practical reality was that medieval winters affected everyone. Though not equally, wealth could soften discomfort, improve food supplies, and provide better shelter. But it could not eliminate dependence on weather, local harvest, and seasonal conditions. The bell beside you seems almost to approve of this observation. It serves rich and poor alike. The same sound reaches every roof. A gust whistles through the tower. The rope turns slightly. You watch it move, then your thoughts wander once more, this time to food, not because you're hungry, though you are, rather because food occupies so much mental space in pre-modern life. The houses below contain barrels, sacks, crocks, baskets, and shelves holding precious winter supplies. Grain, salted meat, dried peas, cheese, onions, ale, beans. Whatever the household has managed to preserve against the season, every loaf matters. Every stored ingredient matters. A poor harvest months earlier can still shape a winter evening. People may fall asleep calculating provisions in the same way modern people sometimes calculate bills, deadlines, or obligations. Hidden among household records from later centuries are countless reminders of how carefully families tracked food supplies. Even when direct evidence from a specific town is scarce, the pattern appears again and again across medieval life. Storage was security. The wind eases. A rare pocket of quiet settles over the tower. You can almost imagine the snow falling straight downward now rather than sideways. The silence encourages another thought, dreams. The people below are dreaming. Some dream of work, some dream of family, some dream of places they have never seen. Dreams held significance for many medieval people, depending on personal belief, local tradition, or religious understanding. Dreams could be dismissed, interpreted, feared, or treasured. Not every dream carried meaning, but many people remained open to the possibility that some did. You wonder what the town dreams about tonight. The baker, the widow, the merchant, the child, the watchman, the priest, each enclosed within a small circle of warmth while snow drifts over the roofs. The surviving record becomes hazy when we try to reconstruct emotional experiences with precision. We can identify customs, buildings, diets, and routines more easily than private feelings. Yet the universality of certain human experiences allows reasonable imagination. Fear, hope, love, exhaustion, worry, and comfort rarely belong to a single century. The tower seems to understand this. It has watched generations come and go, different names, different faces, the same winter nights, the same search for warmth, the same relief when morning finally arrives. You pull the blanket closer around your shoulders. The wool smells faintly of smoke. The scent reminds you again of the houses below, one by one. You picture them scattered across the sleeping town. A workshop with tools hanging on a wall, a cottage with chickens tucked safely inside a shed, an inn where the last embers still glow in the hearth, a home where grandparents sleep beside grandchildren, a room where someone turns over and steals more than their fair share of blanket. History can be grand, history can be dramatic, but most lives happen in rooms like these, small rooms, ordinary rooms, rooms full of practical concerns and familiar voices. The bell tower rises above them, yet depends on them as surely as they depend on it. Without the town, the bell has no audience. Without the bell, the town loses part of its rhythm. The relationship feels almost comforting. Outside, the blizzard continues its patient work. Inside, the chamber remains cold and dim. The rope hangs ready. The bell waits in shadow. And beneath you, hidden under snow, smoke, and darkness, hundreds of sleeping lives rest together in fragile warmth, carrying the quiet story of an ordinary winter night toward the distant promise of dawn. A faint glow appears below. At first, you think it is the imagination. The night has been long enough for shadows to invent their own stories. Yet when you lean toward the louvered opening, you see it again. A small moving light crossing the square beneath the storm. Not a star, not reflected snow. A lantern. You straighten slightly. The town may be sleeping, but one person is awake. The light moves slowly through the darkness, appearing and disappearing behind curtains of falling snow. Sometimes it vanishes completely, only to emerge again a few moments later. The figure carrying it is little more than a silhouette, but the steady pace suggests purpose rather than panic. The watchman, or at least someone performing a similar duty. You follow the lantern's progress as carefully as the storm allows. The tiny glow moves along the edge of the square, pauses briefly near a building, then continues onward. From your height, the person seems remarkably small. Yet there is something reassuring about that little moving point of light. One person awake, one person watching, one person helping the town remain secure while others sleep. Across many medieval towns, night watch duties formed part of local security. Depending on region, size, and custom, designated watchmen might patrol streets, monitor gates, look for fires, discourage theft, or raise alarms when necessary. Their effectiveness undoubtedly varied. Some were diligent. Some were probably counting the minutes until sunrise. Human nature has always provided variety. You smile at the thought. The watchman below may be courageous. He may be exhausted. He may be mentally composing complaints about weather. Perhaps all three at once. The lantern swings gently as he walks. Its light spreads only a short distance before being swallowed by darkness and snow. Modern cities drown night beneath oceans of illumination. Here, a single lantern commands attention. You watch until the glow disappears behind a row of buildings. Then you continue imagining the route. A narrow lane, gate, storehouse, the churchyard wall. Every turn of the patrol carries responsibility. Fire remains one of the greatest fears. A storm like tonight reduces certain risks but introduces others. Wind can spread sparks, chimneys can fail, buildings packed closely together create opportunities for disaster. In a town built largely from wood, straw, and determination, vigilance matters. The bell beside you would play a role if trouble appeared. You glance toward it instinctively, silent, patient, ready. An interesting custom found in some communities involved watchmen, calling out the hour, weather conditions, or brief announcements as they made their rounds. The exact wording varied from place to place, but the practice transformed darkness into something slightly less uncertain. A familiar voice in the night reminded people that someone remained awake. You imagine a call drifting through the snow, a warning, a reassurance, a simple acknowledgement that the town still exists beneath the storm. The lantern reappears briefly, then vanishes again. You settle back against the wall. The image remains with you. One small light moving through an ocean of darkness. It feels symbolic in a way that medieval people would probably appreciate and poets would definitely overuse. The tower creaks softly. The wind has weakened compared with earlier hours, not disappeared, merely settled into a lower, steadier rhythm. Snow still falls, but now it drifts rather than attacks. You notice how different the chamber sounds when the storm relaxes. The louvers whisper instead of rattling. The rope hangs more quietly. The beams groan less frequently. The bell seems even larger in the resulting stillness. Its silence fills the room. You pull your blanket tighter and think about responsibility. Not grand responsibility, small responsibility. The kind that rarely enters chronicles. The watchman walking through snow. The baker rising before dawn. The bell ringer climbing stairs. The widow tending a fire. The stable hand checking animals. Communities survive because countless people perform ordinary duties reliably. History often celebrates kings and battles and treaties. Yet most towns remain standing because someone remembered to do the boring tasks. Few people compose songs about checking latches during a snowstorm. Perhaps they should. The town below certainly depends on it. A surprisingly practical solution adopted in some places involved requiring citizens to participate in watch duties or contribute to local security arrangements. Responsibility could be shared rather than concentrated entirely in one individual. The exact systems varied, but communal obligation often formed part of urban life. You imagine the conversations. Whose turn is tonight? Who failed to appear last week? Who pretends not to hear when duties are assigned? Certain social dynamics appear remarkably resistant to the passage of centuries. The lantern emerges again. Closer now. The watchman crosses part of the square where snow has accumulated deeply. His pace slows. The light bobs carefully. For a moment he stops and looks upward, toward the tower, toward you, or perhaps simply toward the storm. The distance makes certainty impossible. Still, you feel briefly connected. Two people awake, one above, one below, both keeping company with the night. The evidence leaves unanswered questions about exactly how isolated watchmen felt during long winter patrols. Some accounts suggest camaraderie and routine. Others hint at loneliness, boredom, or fear. The reality likely depended on weather, local conditions, and personality. Tonight's weather encourages reflection. Snow absorbs sound, darkness shortens the world. A lantern becomes a companion. The watchman continues on. Eventually the light disappears beyond another building and does not return. You miss it immediately. Strange how quickly the human mind adopts a point of focus. The square seems emptier now. The town seems farther away. The storm regains ownership of the landscape. You rise and stretch carefully. Your muscles protest. Your back reminds you that bell towers were not designed by specialists in ergonomic comfort. The complaint is entirely fair. You walk once around the chamber. The movement restores a little warmth. Snow has accumulated along one sill. A thin line of frost decorates part of the rope. The bell remains unchanged. Its bronze surface catches the faintest hint of reflected snowlight. A giant waiting above sleeping roofs. The hours continue passing, not quickly, not slowly, and simply steadily. Night possesses a different relationship with time. Without clocks demanding attention, moments expand. A drifting snowflake becomes interesting. A distant lantern becomes memorable. A creaking beam becomes worthy of contemplation. You stop near the opening where you first noticed the watchman. Nothing moves outside now. Only snow, only darkness, only the soft breathing of winter. Yet the image remains vivid. A single lantern crossing the square. A reminder that while most of the town sleeps, a few people remain awake performing necessary work. The tower itself belongs to that category. The church below, the bell above, the watchman outside, each plays a part, each contributes to the fragile security of the community. You settle back into your corner once more, the blanket wraps around your shoulders, the wind hums softly through the louvers, far below. The watchman continues his round somewhere beyond sight, and high above the sleeping town you keep your quiet vigil beside the bell, watching over a world buried beneath snow, lantern light, and the patient darkness before dawn. The lantern below has gone from sight, and the tower grows still around you again. Not our, of course. Silence in this place is never empty. It has wind folded into it, snow brushing stone, timber tightening in frost, and there's a faint, sleepy groan of a building that has been standing long enough to have opinions, but after watching the watchman's lantern cross the square, the chamber feels changed. The bell no longer seems merely ceremonial. It feels like a warning held in reserve. You look toward the rope. It hangs close beside you, dark and frosted, waiting for the hand that might turn the sleeping town into a waking one. The thought settles quietly. A bell can soothe, a bell can guide, a bell can call people to prayer, but it can also frighten them awake. In a town of timber walls, thatch, candles, hearths, crowded lanes, and animals bedded close to human homes, fire is not an abstract danger. It is the fear that sits beside every useful flame. One tipped lamp, one loose ember, one chimney badly tended, an ordinary warmth may become disaster. So the bell above you is not only a holy voice, it is also the town's loudest emergency system. You imagine it. A shout from below, footsteps on the stair, a hand grabbing the rope, then bronze breaking the night open. The first strike would tear through sleep. Dogs would bark, babies would cry, adults would sit upright, confused for one terrible breath before understanding arrived. A fire bell is not polite. It does not ask if anyone is resting well. It enters every dream and throws open the door. You shiver, though not entirely from cold. The bell seems to grow heavier in the darkness. Its mouth opens downward and black and still, as if holding back every alarm it has ever given. Perhaps it has rung for flames before, perhaps for a raid, perhaps for a death in winter, perhaps for a storm so violent that frightened people wanted the bell's voice sent out against the sky. The exact record of this one bell may be lost, but the role is clear enough. Bells carried public urgency in a world where news usually moved at walking speed. A town can sleep through a whisper. It cannot sleep through bronze. You rise and cross the board slowly, drawn toward the bell's shadow. Your boots press into a thin scatter of snow that has blown inside. The flakes crush softly beneath you. You stop near the rope and place your hand close to it without gripping it. What would count as danger tonight? Fire? Certainly, a roof giving way beneath snow. A traveller found half frozen near the gate. A violent quarrel spilling into the street, an animal loose in panic, or something more distant, more feared, more human armed men on the road. Though in this storm even trouble would need strong legs and poor judgment to travel far. Still, medieval communities know that danger does not schedule appointments. It arrives when people are hungry, tired, distracted, or asleep. The blizzard pushes against the tower. The louvers answer with a wooden shiver. The bell remains motionless, and in that stillness you sense the difference between readiness and action. Not every night calls for ringing. That is part of the bird. To alarm people falsely is not harmless. Frightened town is hard to calm, but to wait too long could be worse. No convenient instruction panel glows beside you. No list says, pull rope in case of obvious medieval catastrophe. You must listen. You must judge. You must not overreact because a shutter bangs like a ghost with poor manners. Some places develop different ringing patterns for different events, with local listeners able to recognize whether the sound meant prayer or death, curfew, celebration, or alarm. It was not universal in the tidy way modern systems like to be universal, but the idea is wonderfully practical. Sound could carry meaning through rhythm. A slow toll might invite mourning. Repeated urgent ringing might mean danger. The bell did not merely make noise, it spoke in patterns people had learned since childhood. You wonder what pattern this town knows best. One long peal for fire, rapid strokes for attack, a solemn measured toll for death, a shorter ring to gather help. No one has explained it to you properly, which feels very unfair. Considering you are the one sitting beside the rope in a blizzard, medieval training, apparently, has once again failed to include a helpful printed manual. You listen harder. A faint thud below, then another. You freeze. The sound comes again, slow, muffled. Not from the square, not from the stair. Perhaps snow sliding from a nearby roof and landing in heavy clumps. Perhaps a loose door moving in the wind. Perhaps nothing worth waking a town over. Your fingers hover near the rope. For a moment, responsibility sharpens the entire chamber. The cold, the darkness, the height, the smell of rope fibre. Everything becomes clear. You are no longer simply enduring the night. You are deciding whether the night remains ordinary. The thudding stops and no shout follows, no running feet, no glow of fire, only the wind. You lower your hand. The rope swings slightly from the movement of air, untouched. You breathe out, very heroic. You have successfully not panicked at snow falling off something. Future generations will surely sing softly of your restraint, ideally in a warm room, yet the moment leaves its mark. You understand why bell towers mattered. They turned uncertainty into action when action was needed. They gave communities a shared signal larger than any single voice. In the darkness below, hundreds of people might be separated by walls, sleep, and snow. The bell could gather them into one alert body, so of course, the system depended on human judgment. Someone had to see danger. Someone had to reach the ropes. Someone had to know what to ring. Someone had to respond. No system is stronger than the tired people operating it at inconvenient hours. You return to your corner, but do not sit immediately. Instead, you look out through the nearest opening. The snow is still falling, though the wind has softened again. Nothing burns below. No lantern races across the square. No shapes gather near the churchyard. The town remains folded under white darkness. A few medieval streers and local traditions gave bells power beyond warning, imagining them as protectors against lightning, evil spirits, storms, or pestilence. Whether every person believed such things with the same seriousness is impossible to know. Belief is rarely uniform, even in a deeply religious age. One person might trust the bell as a holy defense. Another might value it mainly because it wakes neighbors quickly. Another might believe both before breakfast and neither after a bad night's sleep. People are complicated. The Middle Ages did not simplify them. You sit at last, slowly, careful with your stiff legs. The blanket settles around you. The bell rope hangs within reach. The chamber returns to its patient rhythm, wind, snow, wood, breath. You imagine the bell sounding for disaster and then imagine the relief of not hearing it. There is comfort in an alarm that remains unused. It means the embers are banked safely. The watchman walks without shouting. The roofs hold. The animals sleep. The people below keep their dreams. Tonight, the bell's greatest service may be restraint. It waits so that others can rest. You lean your head against the wall and let that thought soften you. The town does not need panic. It needs watchfulness. It needs the possibility of sound and not the sound itself. It needs the bell high above, ready but quiet. And so you remain there beside it, listening for danger and hearing only winter, while the great bronze warning voice holds its slumber over the sleeping town. The storm is no longer fighting the town, it is settling over it. Hours ago, the blizzard arrived with sharp gusts and restless energy. Now it seems older somehow, more patient. Snow continues to fall, but with a quieter determination. The wind still moves through the louvers, yet it no longer rattles every board and beam. Instead, it drifts around the tower like a traveller who has accepted that the night will be long. You sit wrapped in wool and watch the darkness beyond the openings. Nothing moves. No lantern, no watchman, no late traveller. The town has vanished beneath white and shadow, and because there is little to see, your thoughts turn toward the people below and the ways they understand weather. A modern forecast would be wonderfully useful here. A quick glance at a map, a prediction of snowfall, a reassuring percentage chance that conditions will improve by morning. The people of 1276 possess none of these luxuries. Instead, they rely on memory. observation, local wisdom, an experience passed from one generation to the next. A farmer notices the behavior of animals, a fisherman watches the sky, an old woman studies cloud shapes and wind direction, a shepherd pays attention to unusual silence among birds. No single observation explains everything, yet together they form a practical body of knowledge built across centuries. You imagine a conversation taking place in a warm house below. Someone remarks that the wind shifted before sunset. Someone else says the snow feels different from earlier storms. An elder remembers another winter many years ago when drifts reached halfway up a doorway. Whether every prediction proves accurate is another matter entirely. Human beings have always been remarkably confident about weather right up until weather disagrees. You smile at the thought. Some traditions surrounding storms become woven into local folklore. In one community, a particular cloud formation may be considered unlucky. Elsewhere, unusual animal behavior may be interpreted as a warning. Some beliefs emerge from practical observation. Others grow from imagination, coincidence, or stories repeated often enough to feel true. The line between weather wisdom and weather folklore is not always easy to find, especially at night, especially during a blizzard. You rise and walk toward one of the openings. Snow drifts inward, settling across the sill in soft ridges. You brush a little aside with your glove and peer out. The world remains hidden, yet the darkness itself seems brighter now. Not because dawn approaches, not yet, because fresh snow reflects whatever faint light exists in the sky above the clouds. The landscape has become a pale blur stretching into invisibility. You think about the people below hearing the storm, not seeing it, hearing it, the sound against shutters, the weight gathering on roofs, the occasional slide of snow from a steep surface. Winter speaks through buildings, a house becomes an interpreter, a loose board clicks, a beam creaks, a door vibrates. Each structure translates weather into sound. The tower has been translating all night, only its language is larger. You place your palm against the stone wall, cold, solid, unchanging. The builders who raised this tower likely expected storms like this. They may never have imagined you sitting here centuries later thinking about them, but they certainly understood winter, the thickness of the walls, the design of the openings, the strength of the timber frame. All reveal experience gained through repeated encounters with weather. No one builds a bell tower hoping it survives only pleasant afternoons. The best structures prepare for difficult nights. Your gaze drifts upward toward the bell. Its outline remains visible even in darkness now. You've spent so many hours beside it that your eyes know exactly where to find it. The bronze surface catches faint traces of reflected snowlight. The rope hangs still, the bell waits. It feels almost ceremonial. A strange little detail survives in various accounts from different periods. Some people believe particularly severe storms carried messages, warnings, or signs hidden within them. Not necessarily specific messages with convenient instructions attached, but broader reminders of human vulnerability. Storms encouraged humility. Looking around the chamber, humility seems easy enough to achieve. One strong gust reminds you immediately how small you are. One freezing draft reminds us to you how dependent you are on shelter. One long winter reminds an entire town how much effort survival requires. The night continues. You sit once more and pull the blanket around your knees. Your body has adapted to the cold as much as it intends to. You are no longer shocked by the temperature. Instead, you exist within it. The chill becomes part of the environment like darkness or stone. Time behaves strangely now. Without clocks, the hours lose their sharp edges. You know the night is advancing. You feel it, yet measuring exactly how much remains feels impossible. The town below experiences the same uncertainty. A baker sleeping lightly may wonder whether it is nearly time to rise. A watchman may estimate the remaining darkness from habit. A priest may judge the passing hours through prayer routines. Everyone carries a slightly different version of time. documents from medieval Europe reveal a world organised around bells, religious observances, daylight, seasonal changes, and habitual routines rather than precise minute-by-minute schedules. People certainly tracked time, but often in broader, more practical ways than modern life encourages. The bell beside you participates in that system. It helps transform the vague hours into shared experience. Soon enough it will speak again, not yet, but soon. That realization settles gently into your thoughts. Morning exists. You cannot see it. You cannot measure its distance, yet it is moving towards the town even now. The storm cannot stop that, neither can darkness. A soft noise catches your attention. You look toward the rafters. For a moment, nothing happens. Then you see it. A bird, tiny compared with the bell. It shifts slightly within a sheltered corner near the beams, feathers puffed against the cold. You had forgotten the tower belongs to more than people. The bird remains motionless after that brief movement. Perhaps it has been there all night. Perhaps it slipped inside before the storm worsened. Either way, the discovery feels oddly reassuring. Life finds shelter wherever it can. A tower, a stable, a cottage, a nest tucked into old timber. The question of how many creatures regularly occupied medieval towers remains difficult to answer precisely. Birds, certainly. Insects at warmer times of year, occasionally other unwelcome visitors. Buildings attract tenants regardless of ownership preferences. The bird closes its eyes again. You leave it undisturbed. Outside, snow continues falling. Inside, the chamber settles deeper into stillness. The storm no longer feels threatening, not because it has weakened entirely, because you have lived alongside it long enough to understand its rhythm. The tower understands it too. Stone, wood, bronze, rope, snow, wind, all sharing the same long winter night. You rest your head against the wall and listen once more. No alarm rises from the town. No urgent footsteps climb the stair. No desperate voices call through the darkness. Only the soft breathing of the storm remains. And somewhere beyond the clouds, beyond the snow, beyond the invisible horizon, morning continues its slow approach while the sleeping town waits beneath its blanket of white. At first, you think it is only another movement of the wind. The tower has spent the entire night teaching you caution. Every creak might be a beam settling. Every whisper might be snow against wood. Every faint vibration might be nothing more than weather passing over stone. But this sound is different. A soft movement travels through the rope. Not much, just enough. You open your eyes fully and sit upright. The rope hangs beside the bell, nearly motionless. Yet a moment ago you felt something. A tiny shift. A faint tremor passing through the fibres. You watch. Nothing. Then again, a slight movement. Not enough to ring the bell. Not even close. But enough to remind you that morning duties are approaching. Somewhere below, someone may already be awake. Perhaps the priest. Perhaps a clerk. Perhaps the regular bell ringer beginning his preparations. The town still sleeps. Yet the first people responsible for greeting the day are stirring. You stand and stretch carefully. Your muscles feel as though they belong to an elderly wooden cabinet. Everything creaks. The tower seems sympathetic. The bell chamber answers with its own small groans. Together, you and the building create a surprisingly convincing imitation of an aging forest. The storm has weakened noticeably. Snow still falls, but the wind no longer presses at the walls with the same force. Through the louvered openings, darkness remains dominant, yet there is a subtle difference in the sky. Not light, possibility. The blackness has softened into deep charcoal. Morning remains hidden beyond the horizon, but it is approaching. You move toward the rope. This time you grip it firmly. The fibres feel less shocking than before. Your hands have spent hours adapting to the cold. Frost still clings in places, but not as heavily. You wrap your fingers around the rope and imagine the effort required to set the bell in motion. The bell above weighs far more than you do. perhaps many times more, yet the rope creates a connection between human strength and monumental sound. That relationship feels almost magical, though it is simply engineering. Good engineering often looks magical. You give the rope the slightest test pull, only enough to feel its weight. The tension travels upward immediately, solid, reliable, ready. You release it. The rope settles, no ringing. The town remains asleep. For now, the first bells of the day carried enormous importance in medieval communities. They helped coordinate routines across an entire settlement. Farmers, craftsmen, labourers, merchants, clergy servants, and apprentices all lived by rhythms shaped partly through these familiar sounds. The bell did not create the day, but it helped organise it. You picture the coming hours, a baker rising before dawn, someone opening a stable door, a servant relighting a fire, an apprentice wishing very sincerely that morning would reconsider its arrival. The bell will eventually reach all of them, not immediately, soon, and the thought feels comforting. The night has lasted long enough that the future begins to seem tangible. You walk toward an opening and look out. Snow covers everything. The roofs below have transformed into smooth white shapes. Chimneys rise from the drifts like dark markers. The square remains hidden beneath a blanket of fresh snow. Yet visibility has improved. You can see farther now. The storm is releasing its grip. A narrow lane emerges faintly from the darkness. A roofline becomes visible. Part of the churchyard wall appears beneath its snowy cap. The town is slowly returning. One small sign of morning follows another. A thin thread of smoke rises from a chimney. Another appears nearby, then a third. The people below are beginning to wake, not many, just enough. A fire stirred back to life. A hearth reopened. Breakfast preparations beginning. The town's first breaths of the day. You smile at the sight. Smoke may not seem exciting, but after a long winter night it carries reassuring meaning. Warmth, activity, life, human stubbornness continuing despite weather. A surprisingly common challenge during severe winters involved maintaining reliable access to fire. Preserving embers overnight, sharing coals with neighbours, and carefully managing fuel supplies could become important household concerns. A warm hearth was not merely convenient, it was central to survival. The smoke drifting upward represents success. Another night endured, another morning beginning. The bird in the rafters wakes too. You hear it before you see it, a small rustle, a brief flutter of feathers, then silence. The little creature shifts position, peers into the dimness, and appears mildly offended by the entire situation. A reasonable reaction. The tower is cold, the weather remains unpleasant. Breakfast opportunities seem limited. The bird tucks itself deeper into its sheltered corner. You nod respectfully, a fellow professional surviving the night. The sky outside continues changing, very slowly. A faint greyness spreads behind the clouds. Not enough to illuminate the town, enough to reveal its outline. The distinction matters. Shapes return first. Details follow later. The bell beside you appears clearer than before. Its bronze surface no longer vanishes completely into shadow. The frame supporting it emerges from darkness. The rope becomes easier to see. Everything feels closer, more real. The long dominance of night is ending. Records preserved from medieval communities often reveal how deeply daily schedules depended on seasonal daylight. Winter mornings arrived late, winter evenings arrived early. Entire patterns of work, worship, travel, and household activity adjusted accordingly. The people below know this intimately. They do not need calendars to tell them. Their bodies know, their routines know, their fuel stores know. The snow piled against their doors certainly knows. You sit once more beside the wall. The blanket remains wrapped around your shoulders. The cold remains present, yet something fundamental has changed. Hope has entered the chamber, not dramatic hope, not triumphant hope, simply the quiet certainty that morning is real. The bell seems aware of it too. Soon it will no longer keep silent. Soon its voice will move across roofs and lanes. Soon the sleeping town will begin transforming into a waking town. You imagine the sound, the first strike rolling through the cold air, people stirring beneath blankets, doors opening, animals moving, fires brightening, the day beginning. No matter how long a winter night lasts, eventually it reaches the point, the moment when darkness begins surrendering territory, the moment when the horizon starts winning, the moment when waiting gives way to action. You glance at the rope again. It hangs ready, somewhere below. Footsteps may already be moving through the church. Someone may be climbing a stair. Someone may be preparing for the morning ringing. You cannot hear them yet, but you can feel the town awakening, like a great sleeping animal beginning to stretch. Outside, snow continues falling softly. Inside, the bell chamber grows gradually lighter. The bird watches from the rafters. Smoke rises from chimneys. The rope waits beneath your hand. And high above the frozen roofs of 1276, you sit beside the silent bell, listening to the first faint signs that dawn is finally approaching through the snow. The change begins so gently that you almost miss it. For most of the night, the town below has been a collection of guesses, a roof here, a chimney there, a lantern drifting through snow before vanishing again. Everything else hidden beneath darkness and weather. Now, slowly, the world starts returning. Not all at once. Not dramatically. Just a little more shape with every passing minute. You stand near the louvered opening and look out across the sleeping roofs. The sky remains overcast, but the blackness has softened into a deep blue grey. Snow continues falling in thin, drifting curtains. The storm is not gone, merely tired, and beneath it, the town emerges. A chimney first, then a roof ridge, then part of the market square, then the churchyard wall. The details seem to rise from the darkness like islands appearing through fog. You rest your hands on the wooden frame of the opening. The wood feels cold enough to sting. Below, a thin ribbon of smoke climbs into the morning air. Another follows nearby. Then another. People are awake, not many, but enough. A baker somewhere is feeding a fire. A household servant is coaxing embers back to life. Someone is standing in a doorway, blinking into the pale morning and wondering why winter insists on returning every year despite repeated objections. You approve of this complaint. It feels timeless. The town itself looks different beneath fresh snow. Everything appears cleaner, softer. The rough edges of daily life have been covered for a few brief hours. Mud is hidden. Refuse is hidden. Wheel ruts are hidden. Even poverty seems disguised beneath white drifts. The illusion will not last. It never does. Once people begin moving, paths will reopen, snow will be trampled, smoke will darken the air, animals will leave tracks, carts will cut lines through the square. But for this moment, before the day properly begins, the town possesses a fragile beauty. You understand why artists and poets and travellers have always paused to admire fresh snow. It offers temporary perfection. Reality returns soon enough. A gust of wind lifts loose powder from a roof and sends it swirling into the air. The movement catches your attention. Then another roof does the same. The town is waking not only through people but through the weather itself. The bird in the rafters notices it too. You hear a brief flutter behind you. The small creature shifts position, peering toward the light. Its patience seems exhausted. An entirely reasonable position. Unlike you, the bird has no philosophical interest in medieval architecture. It simply wants conditions suitable for being a bird again. You nod in silent agreement. The bell chamber has lost some of its mystery now. Light changes everything. The rope appears more ordinary. The beams reveal their age. The floorboards show scattered snow, dust, and scratches accumulated over many years. Even the bell seems less supernatural. Still impressive, still enormous, but more clearly a crafted object rather than a giant shadow occupying the darkness. You walk slowly around it. The bronze surface carries marks of casting and age. Small imperfections catch the growing light. The bell looks strong enough to outlive everyone currently living in the town below, and perhaps it will. Buildings, bells, bridges, roads, and walls often survive their builders. That thought lingers with you. How many people have stood where you stand now? How many winter mornings have appeared through these same openings? The tower does not answer. It simply remains. Snow falls, years pass, generations change. The bell stays. A curious thing about old structures is that they collect memory without understanding it. The tower has witnessed celebrations, funerals, arguments, prayers, storms, marriages, and ordinary mornings beyond counting. Yet it remembers none of them consciously. The memories belong to people. The tower merely provides the stage. You lean out slightly. The square below becomes clearer. Fresh snow covers everything in smooth white layers. The well stands at the centre, half buried. Market stalls appear as rounded shapes beneath their coverings. A cart near one edge of the square resembles a sleeping animal under a blanket. Soon people will reclaim these spaces. For now, they remain still. A door opens. The movement catches your eye immediately. A figure steps outside carrying a bucket. Even from this height, the body language is unmistakable. Cold surprise. The person pauses, looks around, probably regrets every life choice leading to this particular moment, then continues onward. You smile. Some experiences require no translation across centuries. The bucket carrier leaves a trail of footprints, the first clear tracks you have seen all morning. Dark impressions crossing bright snow, simple evidence that the day has begun. Others soon follow. A second door opens, then a third. A dog appears briefly and immediately seems offended by the weather, and the dog retreats. Wisdom comes in many forms, light spreads further across the town, the roofs no longer blend together. Individual buildings become recognizable. Workshops, homes, storehouses, the inn, the bakery, the lane leading towards the fields now hidden beneath winter. Everything looks smaller from above, not less important, simply smaller. The tower offers perspective. During the night, each imagined problem felt enormous. Every sound demanded attention. Every gust seemed significant. Morning shrinks things. The town remains fragile, but it also appears resilient. People are already returning to their routines. A fire lit, a door opened, a bucket carried, a path cleared. Human beings have always been remarkably stubborn about continuing daily life. The bell beside you will soon join that process. Its voice will spread across the awakening settlement, not as an alarm, not as a warning, as a beginning. You imagine the sound moving through the morning air, across roofs bright with snow, across chimneys releasing smoke, across lanes where fresh footprints appear, across homes where people stretch, yawn, and reluctantly leave blankets behind. The morning bell belongs to everyone, rich, poor, young, old. It asks nothing complicated, only that the day has arrived. The sky grows brighter. Clouds remain thick, but their colour changes from charcoal to silver grey. Snowflakes become easier to see. The churchyard emerges almost completely now, its paths hidden beneath drifts and its stones wearing white caps. A few more figures appear below. One clears snow from a doorway. Another crosses the square carefully. A third pauses to speak with someone. The town is reassembling itself, piece by piece, voice by voice, footprint by footprint. You rest one hand lightly against the rope. Soon, not yet, but soon. The long winter night that seemed endless only hours ago now feels surprisingly distant. The darkness has retreated. The storm has weakened. Smoke rises steadily from chimneys. People move through the square, The world is returning, and from your place high above the roofs of this 1276, wrapped in wool and surrounded by timber, bronze, and fading shadows, you watch the frozen town emerge from beneath the storm, ready once more to greet the day. The first footprints appear like ink on fresh parchment. From your place high in the tower, you can follow them easily. A narrow line of dark impressions crosses the square, curves around a drift, and disappears between two buildings. A second set soon joins them, then a third. The town is beginning to write itself back onto the snow. You watch with quiet fascination. During the night, winter erased nearly everything. Roads vanished, paths disappeared. Familiar landmarks softened beneath white layers. For a few precious hours, the landscape belonged to weather alone. Now people are reclaiming it, one careful step at a time. A man carrying a bundle emerges from a doorway and heads toward the square. His pace is cautious. Snow reaches above his ankles in places. He pauses near a drift, chooses a different route, and continues on. Moments later, a woman appears with a basket. She follows part of the same path. Why make a new trail when someone has already done the difficult work? Civilization often advances through exactly this principle. Someone else struggles first, everyone else benefits. The thought makes you smile. Below, a dog trots across the snow with considerably more confidence than most humans. It leaves a pattern of paw prints that weave unpredictably between the neat lines created by boots. The dog appears extremely pleased with itself. Perhaps it should be. Its route is certainly more creative. The morning light strengthens gradually. Clouds still cover the sky, turning the world silver rather than golden, but visibility improves with every passing minute. Roofs stand out clearly now. Chimneys release steady columns of smoke. The churchyard becomes fully visible beneath its blanket of snow. You lean against the wooden frame of the opening. The tower feels different in daylight. Smaller somehow, more practical. The mystery that filled the night has retreated into corners and shadows. The bell chamber is once again what it has always been, a working place suspended above a working town. Yet traces of the night remain. Frost still clings to parts of the rope. Snow still lies scattered across the boards. The bird remains tucked among the rafters, though now it watches the world with renewed interest. Everyone seems relieved by the arrival of morning, even birds. A group of figures gathers near the edge of the square. 3 people, perhaps 4. From this distance, details are impossible to distinguish, but their movements suggest conversation. One points toward a drift, another gestures toward a roof. They stand together for a few moments before separating again. Winter mornings often begin with assessment. How much snow? Which paths need clearing? Did any roof suffer damage? Can travel continue? Practical questions arrive before philosophical ones. The town has responsibilities waiting. You imagine someone opening a workshop door and discovering that snow has drifted halfway across the threshold. Not ideal. You imagine another person checking stored firewood with increasing concern. Also not ideal. You imagine a child looking outside and seeing only snow. Wonderful. Children and adults have a remarkable ability to interpret the same weather in completely opposite ways. A young boy appears near the square. You notice him because he immediately abandons the sensible path and marches directly into deeper snow. His progress slows dramatically. He continues anyway. This determination lasts approximately 10 seconds before reality intervenes. The boy returns to the cleared track. Experience remains one of humanity's most effective teachers. The town grows busier, not crowded, not noisy, simply awake. A cart emerges from a side lane. Its wheels struggle through the snow. The horse pulling it moves carefully, placing each hoof with obvious caution. The driver walks alongside rather than riding. Everything about the scene feels slower than it would in summer. Winter changes the speed of life, not completely, just enough. Tasks require more effort. Travel takes longer, simple journeys become complicated. A bucket of water weighs the same in every season, yet somehow feels heavier when carried through snow. The bell beside you remains silent. Its moment approaches, but has not yet arrived. You find yourself appreciating the pause. The town is waking naturally. People are discovering the morning through smoke, footprints, conversation, and cold air. Soon the bell will unite those separate experiences into one shared sound. For now, each household exists within its own small world. A door opens. A fire burns, breakfast appears, work begins. The square slowly fills with movement. You notice someone clearing snow from a roof edge using a long pole. Another person sweeps a narrow path toward a stable. Nearby. A pair of neighbours stop to exchange a few words. Perhaps they discuss the storm. Perhaps they discuss something entirely unrelated. Human conversation has never required ideal timing. The tower has watched countless mornings like this. Not identical. No two ever are. Yet familiar. A snowfall. A thaw. A market day. A feast day. A funeral. A wedding. The details change. The pattern endures. Generation after generation leaves footprints across the same square. The snow covering the town creates a strange illusion. For a brief time, wealth becomes slightly harder to identify. Grand houses and modest homes wear the same white covering. Expensive roofs and simple roofs disappear beneath the same storm. Of course, the differences remain. They always do. But winter has a habit of smoothing appearances. Everyone must clear paths. Everyone must keep warm. Everyone must manage the weather. A bell rings somewhere far away. Not your bell, not yet. The sound reaches the tower faintly through the cold air. Perhaps another settlement, perhaps a distant chapel, perhaps simply an echo playing tricks across the landscape. You listen until it fades, then silence returns. The town below continues waking. A woman shakes snow from a blanket. A man leads an animal toward a shed. Children appear briefly and disappear again. Smoke thickens above several chimneys. Life expands outward from every doorway. The world that seemed lost beneath darkness only a few hours ago now feels surprisingly ordinary. There is comfort in that. Storms often appear overwhelming during the night. By morning, people discover that life continues, not unchanged, perhaps not untouched. But continuing, you rest one hand lightly against the rope. The fibres feel less hostile now. Perhaps your hands are warmer. Perhaps daylight changes perception. Perhaps the rope has decided to become more cooperative. Whatever the reason, it feels familiar beneath your fingers. The bell hangs above. The town moves below, and between them stands the simple connection of rope, wood, and human effort. Soon the bell will speak. Soon its voice will spread across rooftops bright with snow. Soon the morning will become fully shared. For now, you remain at the opening, watching fresh tracks multiply across the square while the frozen town of 1276 steadily awakens beneath the fading storm. The growing light reveals what darkness had hidden. Not only the town below, the tower itself. You turn from the opening and look around the chamber with fresh eyes. All night, this place has been shadow, rope, wind, bell, and survival. Now it becomes a room filled with marks, small evidence, quiet remains, the kinds of traces people leave when they do not expect anyone important to notice. And those are often the best traces. Near the beam where your blanket rests, the scratched cross is clearer now. Its lines are rough, uneven, and slightly deeper at one end, as if the hand that made it pressed harder while finishing the mark. Beside it are other cuts, smaller and less certain. A few short lines, a shape that might be a letter, a cluster of notches that might count something, or might simply be the work of a bored person with a knife and too much winter. You lean closer. The marks do not explain themselves. That is part of their charm. A king's charter announces its importance loudly. A tower scratch whispers. Someone was here and had a moment to spare. You imagine a bell ringer waiting through another storm, perhaps 50 years before you, perhaps only last winter, carving absent-mindedly while listening for trouble below. Maybe the marks counted days. Maybe they marked repairs. Maybe they were simply the medieval equivalent of tapping a finger on a table during a long meeting. People have always needed something to do while waiting. The bird in the rafters shifts again, sending a tiny drift of dust down through the pale morning light. You glance up and see more evidence of hidden tower life, old nesting material tucked into a corner, feathers caught between beams, a stain below one perch that requires no scholarly interpretation and perhaps should not be inspected too closely. This tower belongs to bells. Yes, but also to birds, spiders, dust, cold ropes, hands, time. The official purpose of a building is rarely its only life. You move carefully around the chamber, keeping one hand near the wall when the boards feel uneven. Daylight reveals repairs in the timber frame. One beam is darker than the others. Another has a patch where wood was joined or strengthened. Iron fittings hold parts of the frame together. Some are black with age. Some look slightly newer, though newer might still mean older than any living person below. A bell tower is not built once and then ignored. It is maintained across generations. Someone climbs, someone inspects, someone replaces, someone tightens, someone mutters at the expense. Every strong building is also a history of repairs. You can see where the floorboards have been worn near the rope, not evenly across the room, but concentrated in one area where ringers must have stood again and again. Feet returning to the same spot over years create their own kind of document. No ink, no parchment, just pressure and time. You place your boot beside the worn area. It fits naturally. That makes you smile. The body learns a place quickly when others have shaped it first. Below, voices begin to rise more clearly from the square. They are still muffled by snow and distance, but the town is awake enough now to provide a gentle human murmur. A door thuds, a horse snorts, someone calls across the morning. The ordinary world is returning, and yet up here you remain among older, quieter signs. On one side of the chamber, the stone around an opening has been chipped and smoothed by weather. Snow has blown through this gap countless times, rain too, summer wind, autumn leaves, perhaps even the smoke of distant fairs. The tower receives every season through these openings, year after year, while pretending to be solid and immovable. You brush your fingers along the stone. It is damp in one place, rough in another, cold everywhere. A small piece of mortar crumbles beneath your touch. You stop at once, suddenly respectful. No need to personally accelerate architectural decline. The tower has enough problems without a sleepy visitor poking at it. A faint inscription catches your eye near the lower part of a beam. It may be a name, or the beginning of one. The letters are crude and shallow, perhaps made by someone who knew letters but did not write often. Literacy in a town like this is uneven. Clergy, some merchants, officials, and certain trained people may read and write, while many others rely on memory, speech, signs, marks, and trusted intermediaries. A carved name here may represent pride, boredom, devotion, or mischief. You try to make it out. No use. The letters resist you. The past often does that. It lets you stand close enough to feel connected, then refuses to speak clearly. You look back at the bell, in daylight. Its inscription is more visible, though still difficult. Raised bands circle the bronze. The surface bears a line of text you cannot fully read from where you stand. Perhaps it invokes Mary, a saint, or the divine. Perhaps it includes the name of the founder or donor. Perhaps the bell once had a name spoken proudly when it was blessed. Medieval communities could treat bells with striking affection. They might be named, blessed, and spoken of as if their voices had moral character. Whether every person took them literally is impossible to know. Some may have believed deeply, some may have followed custom, some may have enjoyed the ceremony and the noise. Human belief rarely stands in neat rows, still. The bell feels less like a mere object after the night you have spent beside it. You know its stance, you know its shadow. You know the rope that serves it, you know how the storm sounds around it. That is enough to create attachment. A feather drifts from above and lands near the bell rope. You watch it settle, again with the feather. This small tower resident seems determined to provide entertainment. In the grey morning light, the feather looks soft, almost luminous. It trembles when the air moves, then lies still on the worn boards where countless feet have stood. You leave it there. Not every trace needs to be cleaned away. The chamber contains so many tiny histories that the bell almost becomes only one part of a larger story. A story of ringers and birds, repairs and storms, scratches and crumbs, frost and footsteps. A story not written in books, but held in surfaces. The town below may never think about these details. Why would people hear the bell? They do not imagine the feather. They hear the morning ring. They do not picture the scratched cross beside the beam, or the dark stain near the rafters, or the rope fibres polished by tired palms. That is how public things work. The visible purpose hides the hidden labour. The bell speaks beautifully because someone maintains the rope. The tower stands proudly because someone repairs the timber. The town wakes because someone climbs cold stairs before dawn. You sit back in your corner for a final moment among these traces. The blanket around your shoulders, the worn boards beneath you, the bell above, the feather near the rope, the bird blinking in the rafters like a tiny supervisor. Outside, the town continues to wake. More footprints cross the square, more smoke writhed, more voices join the morning. Inside, the tower's hidden lives remain quiet, waiting for the next storm, the next ringer, the next bored hand with a knife, the next bird foolish or clever enough to shelter near the bells. You have not only slept in a bell tower, you have listened to its memory, and now, as the light grows stronger, those small marks seem to glow with the gentle dignity of ordinary people who passed through, did their work, left almost nothing behind, and still somehow remain. The town no longer belongs to the night. By now, the change is unmistakable. Smoke rises from dozens of chimneys, doors open and close, fresh paths spread through the snow like branching streams. The square that vanished beneath darkness and storm has become recognizable again, filled with movement, purpose, and the familiar routines of people beginning another day. You remain high above it all. For one last stretch of morning, the tower offers its quiet perspective. The bell chamber seems almost peaceful now. The long night has taken something from the place. Not physically. The same boards creak beneath your boots. The same rope hangs from the bell. The same openings frame the town below. Yet the mystery has faded. In its place comes clarity. You can see individual rooftops. You can follow people crossing the square. You can even distinguish where snow has already been shoveled aside and where it still lies untouched. The town has awakened completely. A cart rolls slowly across the market space. Two men stop beside it. A woman carrying a basket pauses to exchange a few words. Near a doorway, a child attempts to walk across a drift and immediately sinks deeper than expected. The child remains determined. The drift remains unconvinced. It is a brief contest. The drift wins. You laugh quietly to yourself. Some lessons arrive every winter regardless of century. The bell above you catches more light now. Its bronze surface glows softly against the darker timbers. The inscription circling its shoulder is easier to see than before, though still difficult to read from your position. It no longer feels like a sleeping giant. It feels ready. The morning has reached the point where silence would be unusual. The town expects the bell, not anxiously, not dramatically, simply because the sound belongs here. You place a hand against the rope. The fibres feel familiar now. That surprises you. Last night they seemed foreign, frozen, and intimidating. Now they feel almost friendly. Perhaps familiarity is one of the quiet powers of repetition. The same stair climbed enough times becomes ordinary. The same bell heard enough times becomes comforting. The same winter routine followed enough years becomes part of a person's understanding of life. Below, a blacksmith's workshop shows signs of activity. You cannot hear the ringing of iron from this height, but you can see movement near the doorway. Work has begun despite the snow elsewhere. Another figure clears a path toward a stable. Another leads an animal through the square. Another struggles with a stubborn door that appears to have frozen overnight. The door is winning at the moment. Not permanently, just temporarily. Buildings occasionally enjoy small victories over people. The tower certainly has. It has spent an entire night reminding you that comfort is optional. Yet now, looking across the town, you feel a growing affection for the place. Not because it is easy, because it continues. Storms arrive. Snow falls. Roofs leak. Wood cracks. Animals escape. People argue. People worry. People laugh. People wake up and continue anyway. There is something reassuring about that persistence. The bird finally leaves its perch. You hear the flutter before you see it. A blur of wings crosses the chamber. The little creature pauses near one opening, considers the morning, and launches itself into the cold air beyond the tower. Gone, just like that, its departure feels oddly significant. The bird arrived during the storm. Now it leaves with the daylight, a small story completed. You watch until it disappears against the pale sky, then you turn back toward the square. The town seems busier every minute. Tracks crisscross the snow in all directions now. The smooth white surface of dawn has become a web of human movement. Children, animals, workers, neighbours, visitors, everyone leaves a mark. The snowfall may cover those marks later, new weather may erase them. But for now they remain visible, a record written directly onto the morning. You think about the scratches in the beams, the worn floorboards, the rope polished by countless hands, the hidden traces left throughout the tower. The footprints below are not so different. Another generation adding its marks, another day joining thousands before it. The bell tower watches all of it, patient, steady, unimpressed by the individual importance. The same bell that greeted yesterday's town now greets today's. The same tower that watched one generation grow old now watches another. There is comfort in structures that endure. Not because they last forever, nothing does, but because they remain long enough to connect different lives together. The wind has almost disappeared now. Only an occasional breath of cold air enters through the louvers. The storm has exhausted itself. Snow still rests on rooftops. Snow still covers the roads beyond town. But the blizzard itself has passed. The danger never became disaster. The alarm never sounded. The bell spent the night doing perhaps its most important job, waiting. A bell that never rings during an emergency may appear inactive. In truth, it represents a peaceful night, no fire, no panic, no desperate call for help, just darkness, weather, and the steady continuation of life. You appreciate that more now than you would have at sunset. The hours in the tower have changed your perspective. The night seemed large while you were inside it. Morning reveals that the town survived it quite well. A few drifts, a few inconveniences, a few extra chores, nothing more. People are already adapting, as they always do. Cool. Your gaze drifts one final time across the square, the bucket carrier, the cart driver, the children, the neighbours talking in the cold, the stable hand, the baker. None of them know you have spent the entire night above them. They do not need to. The tower is not about being noticed. It is about service. The bell rings whether anyone thinks about the rope. The town wakes whether anyone notices the worn boards overhead. The work matters even when invisible. You tighten the blanket around your shoulders and stand quietly beside the bell. The morning has fully arrived. The sleeping town from last night is gone. In its place stands a living town, A working town, a town brushing snow from doorways and stepping carefully into another winter day. And high above it, surrounded by bronze, timber, and the fading memory of the storm, you watch as ordinary medieval life returns to every street, roof, chimney, and footprint below. The time has come to leave the tower. You know it before you move. The morning has fully claimed the town. Smoke drifts steadily above the rooftops. The square is alive with motion. Fresh tracks cross older tracks. Doors open. Voices rise. Somewhere below, someone is already complaining about the weather. And somewhere else, another person is insisting that this storm was nothing compared to one from years ago. Some traditions never fade. You stand beside the bell one final time. For a moment, neither of you moves. The bronze giant hangs in its timber frame exactly as it did when you first arrived. Yet it feels different now. Or perhaps you do. You know the rope. You know the wind through the louvers. You know the creak of the beams. You know the little bird's corner in the rafters. You know the scratches carved into old wood. You know how the storm sounds at midnight and how the town looks at dawn. A single night is not much in the life of a bell tower. Yet it is enough to make a stranger feel familiar with a place. You rest your hand briefly against the rope, not to pull it, simply as a farewell. The fibres are cold but no longer hostile. They feel worn smooth in places by generations of hands. Other people will grip this rope tomorrow. Others will grip it next winter. Others will grip it long after every footprint currently visible in the square has disappeared. The tower will continue. That thought feels strangely comforting. You turn toward the stair. The spiral descends into shadow below. Yesterday evening, the climb felt like an ascent into another world. Now the descent feels like a return. You begin walking, one careful step, then another. The stone curves around you. Light from above fades gradually as you move downward through the tower's body. The sounds change too. The bell chamber remains behind. The wind becomes quieter. The town grows louder. A voice somewhere below, a door closing. The distant sound of an animal, life gathering strength. The spiral staircase seems less mysterious in daylight. The worn centres of the steps are easier to see. The marks left by countless feet become obvious. You imagine generations making this same journey. Upward in darkness, downward in daylight, again and again. The tower never remembers their names. The stone remembers their weight. You continue descending. The church appears once more. Its interior is no longer wrapped in darkness. Pale morning light filters through the windows, touching columns, walls, and floor. The cold remains, but daylight softens it somehow. The nave feels larger now, more welcoming. The silence has changed. Nighttime silence listened. Morning silence waits. Soon people will arrive, prayers will be spoken, candles may be lit. Daily life will pass through the building again. The church is waking just as the town has woken. You pause for a moment. The scent of old stone, wax, timber, and winter air remains exactly as before. Yet it no longer feels lonely. Perhaps because you know what lies outside. The sleeping town has become a living one. You cross the nave slowly. The light catches traces of colour on distant walls. A painted figure, a worn decoration, small remnants of countless ordinary days, nothing dramatic, nothing famous, just continuity. That may be the true theme of this place, and not glory, not power, continuation. The church survives one winter after another. The town survives one winter after another. People arrive, work, love, worry, grow old, and disappear. The bell remains. The tower remains. The rhythm continues. You reach the door. When you pull it open, cold morning air greets you immediately. Fresh, clean, sharp. Snow covers the churchyard in smooth white layers broken by a growing network of tracks. The storm's work remains visible everywhere, but so does the work of people already moving through it. You step outside. The world feels wider than it did the previous evening. Yesterday, darkness and snowfall closed everything in. Today, distance has returned. Fields stretch beyond the town. Roads emerge from beneath drifts. The horizon exists again. You walk slowly through the churchyard. Your boots sink into fresh snow. The air smells of smoke, wood, damp wool, and winter. Nearby, someone crosses the square carrying a bundle. Another person sweeps snow from a doorway. A dog investigates a drift with serious commitment. The ordinary life of the town continues around you. No one seems especially interested in the fact that you spent the night in the bell tower, which is perfectly appropriate. The tower was never about you. It was about the town, about the people below, about the shared rhythms that hold a community together. You stop once and look back. The bell tower rises above the roofs exactly as it did when the storm began. Stone, timber, bronze, a patient watcher above the square, in daylight. It appears smaller than it did during the blizzard, less mysterious, less imposing. Yet you know better now. You know how the wind sounds inside it. You know how darkness gathers beneath its beams. You know how the bell waits through the night, and so the tower seems richer rather than smaller, familiar rather than frightening. You continue walking. The snow crunches beneath your boots. Voices drift through the cold air. The morning brightens, and gradually the tower becomes part of the town once more instead of the entire world. As you leave, a final thought settles gently into your mind. Most of history was not made of battles, crowns, and famous names. Most of it happened in places like this: a baker relighting a fire, a watchman carrying a lantern, a child making footprints, a bird sheltering in a beam, a bell waiting through a storm, a winter morning arriving exactly when it promised it would. The night is over now. The town is awake. The snow still glows softly across the roofs, and somewhere above, the bell remains ready for whatever tomorrow brings. For a few moments longer, let your thoughts drift across that quiet medieval town. See the smoke rising. See the footprints crossing the square. See the tower standing calm against the pale winter sky. Let the sounds grow softer. Let the distance grow wider. Let the cold become gentle, and let the memory of the night settle peacefully behind you, like fresh snow covering an old path. The morning continues to brighten. You walk farther from the churchyard, and the sounds of the town begin to blend together into a soft, distant murmur. The scrape of a shovel, the call of a neighbour, the quiet creak of a cart moving through snow, none of it demands your attention anymore. The bell tower remains behind you, steady, patient, untroubled by your departure. The roofs below it shine beneath a pale winter light, and the smoke drifting upward dissolves slowly into the grey sky above. The storm that seemed so immense during the night has become only another memory carried by the morning. You breathe in the cold air one last time. The town feels safe now, not because danger no longer exists, not because winter has surrendered, but because life has resumed its familiar rhythm. People are where they belong, doors are opening, fires are burning, footsteps are crossing fresh snow. The world continues. And as you watch, the details begin to soften. The square grows quieter. The rooftops blur gently into the distance. The voices become faint. The tower itself becomes smaller against the horizon. Soon it is only part of the landscape, then only a shape, then only a memory. You carry with you the feeling of rough rope beneath your hand, the scent of cold stone and wood smoke, the whisper of snow against the louvers, and the deep silent presence of the bell waiting above the sleeping town. There is no need to hurry now, no need to listen for alarms, no need to watch the weather. The long winter night has passed, the town is awake, and you can finally rest. So let the snow fall softly in your imagination. Let the morning light spread across the roofs. Let the tower stand quietly where it has always stood, and let yourself drift gently away from the year 1276, leaving the bell, the storm, and the sleeping town exactly where they belong, safe beneath the pale winter sky. Sweet dreams.